Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Year 25A. Sal was nervous. He had entered the island where he heard Morgana lived the day before and stood now in front of her home, Avalon. Sal had come to Avalon. He had heard rumors about Morgana Le Fay and her ability to heal. Of course he had also heard that she adored the dark arts, nothing Sal wanted to learn. But he had to. He had to know, and he wanted to learn healing and family magic. He had decided this since his father had told him about his heritage, since his father had told him his eyes told the world that he was born a Le Fay, and since he had learned how he could be the descendant of Arthur and Morgana. It had been 3.5 years ago, when Morgana had come and cornered Arthur. Sal had not been there at that time, and had later heard about the argument about Morgana's son whom she had borne after a night she had shared with Arthur. Arthur had not been pleased that the child had been born, and had not wanted the child as his heir. Simple said he had denied the birthright to his child, and Merlin had guided Morgana out of the castle. Sal did not know how it happened, but the result of this meeting was a shared enmity between Sal's fathers and Morgana. So Sal might be a descendant of Morgana, but he also was Merlin's son, and Morgana hated Merlin. And because of that, Sal was standing in front of the door, unsure how to proceed. "Do you want to stand there forever, lad?" a sarcastic voice asked, and suddenly the door opened and Salazar was looking at a middle-aged woman who carried a maybe 4-year-old child on her hip. Sal said, stuttering. I was looking for Morgana Le Fay. I was told she lives here," he finally said, looking at the woman. She had pitch-black hair and deadly glowing green eyes. Sal knew these eyes. They were the same he had inherited from his own mother. The boy on Morgana's hip did not have these eyes. He had brown ones, eyes that reminded Sal of Arthur. So this child is Mordred, Sal thought. Then he corrected himself. Mordred. His name was changed over time. "It's Mordred. And who is looking for me?" Morgana asked him, staring at him coolly but intensively. "My name is Salazar Imris." Sal had thought about calling himself Le Fay, but he did not want to trick her with that. He might be a Le Fay by blood, but he never carried the name before. "Imris?" she asked, still staring. "As in Merlin Imris?" I guess," Sal answered nervously. "What do you want, breed of Merlin?" Sal gulped and found his courage. "I am here to ask for an apprenticeship," he said, squaring his shoulders. Morgana raised her eyebrows. "The breed of Merlin asks me, Great Morgana Le Fay, for an apprenticeship," she said, suddenly sounding dangerous. Sal's gaze grew cold when he met her eyes head-on. He stared back, daring her to say anything more than she had before, and Morgana blinked. "You're no Emrys," she finally said. "You're of my blood. You are my heir." Her gaze turned to her own child. "But how come you are? I am the one who continues the main line. So how come you exist when I have a child?" Sal gulped again. He knew he had to explain it to her, and best without lying too much. I am not from this time." He finally confessed, and Morgana's eyes returned to him. Again her eyebrows rose. I am your many times grandchild, you could say." Sal finally settled with, "I came here to learn from you. The truth, but not true enough to conclude the right things." "When you are my many times grandchild, how come you carry Merlin's name?" she asked, now definitely interested. "Shouldn't you carry my name, or Arthur's?" My mother was the heir," Sal answered nervously. "I carry my father's name as I have no right to carry my mother's." "You have our magic," Morgana said, narrowing her eyes. "You know our family magic, and as such you have the right to carry our name. You needn't befoul yourself with Merlin's name." Sal wisely said nothing. He had foreboded that Morgana would not be pleased with his last name. "Well, that is my problem," Sal said. "I do not know family magic." Morgana stared at him when he told her. "Your mother didn't teach you?" she asked, appalled and disgusted. "She could not teach me," Sal corrected. "She died when I was a mere babe." "Then surely your grandmother." There was a war, Sal said with a bitter note in his voice. I am the last with magic of my line. I was since I counted one winter. I still have an aunt, but she did not inherit any magic. She cannot tell me what I need to know. No, she wouldn't, Morgana said. So that's why you're here? Yes, Sal answered. I needed a competent teacher to learn from, so I came here. There was a moment of silence while Morgana was piercing through him with her eyes. It felt like a test, and Sal grew nervous the longer she stared. And learn you will, Salvazazaha, Morgana said finally, and smiled. Come in. I will teach you. I don't want to end my family name with the Emrys line, even if I do not object your mother's choice in marriage. The Emrys line is a strong one. Inserting its blood in our line is definitely a good choice. Sal wisely forgot to mention that his Emrys father never had married his mother. He did not want to tell Morgana that he truly was Mirdan's son. He was sure she would not like that very much. So he just entered, fully aware that he would have to learn all she wanted him to in the next few years, and there was no telling when she would end her training. The hut was small and neatly kept. Morgana pointed at a simple wooden chair in front of the fire. Sit, she said while she herself sat down in a more comfortable one. Do you know how to read? She asked. I do, Sal answered. So your aunt did teach you some things, Morgana said. What about the family books? Did you read them? No, Sal answered. My parents' home was destroyed. I have nothing left but an old cloak of my father's, Morgana cited. Sal could feel her using legilimency on him. He let her through, not to his memories but to his feelings so that she could analyze if he was telling the truth. But you know basic occlumency, she said, even if it is a barbaric form of it. My father taught me, Sal answered truthfully. Well, I will teach you better, Morgana said. Forget what your father told you. I will teach you real occlumency. Yes, my lady, Sal said. Call me mother, Morgana said. You may be my many times grandson, but you are young enough to call me mother. Say, how many winters do you count? 15, Sal answered, using his body's winters and not his mind's. He was not sure if he liked Morgana's suggestion to call her mother, but he knew he would do it anyway. She was his ancestor, and because of that his elder. When she wanted to be called mother, then he would do it without questioning. So your magic has matured one time until now? Morgana asked, and Sal shrugged. I don't know, he said, truthfully. When he said that, Morgana took out her staff and pointed it at him. Sal stiffed but did not flinch or take out his own staff. Morgana smiled at that. She definitely had seen his slightly concealed reaching for his staff before he could stop himself to do so. You have good reflexes, she said. Your father taught you the way of the warrior, I believe. He taught me the way of the druids, mother, Sal answered. I am no warrior, but I have to know how to fight as a druid. Yes, you do, Morgana said, and then whispered a spell. Soft yellow light hit Sal's body, then he started to glow green. Oh, that's good, Morgana said. You did just mature one time. I will be able to teach you from the scratch, and we have time. Your second time will be not before the third winter. You can tell that? Sal asked, surprised. Even his father had not been able to tell that when Sal had started to mature for the first time. Yes, Morgana said. And you will also be able when I have taught you all I know. There are just 2 conditions. I hear. You will let me adopt you, Morgana said. As my child, I will have the full rights to teach you all I want without you protesting it. Sal had thought about this possibility. Morgana knew that Medrod would not be able to use family magic, and she wanted to make sure that someone would be able to use it fully, even if this someone was an heir from a distant future. When he truly was her son, even an adopted one, and not just a descendant, she had a better grasp at his magic. A parent simply understood their child's magic better than anyone. I will, he answered. He had hoped to prevent it, but it was not unexpected. Well, it will change nothing in my blood, he thought. He simply would have more access to the family magic, and that definitely wasn't bad at all. The other condition is that you will teach Medrod how to fight when he is old enough, Morgana said. Sal nodded, knowing that he there also had no choice. even if this might later be the cause of Arthur's demise, but even if it was, refusing would not change history. Arthur would die, and when history would like Medrud to be the cause of his demise, so it would be like that. Sal would not be able to change that when he refused. I will, but I am not more than mediocre in using a sword. As long as you teach him, Morgana said. The rest he will learn by himself. The time at Morgana's flew by quickly. Sal soon got used to call Morgana mother, and under her tutelage, he started to learn how to use his family magic. He also started to learn how to heal and also the dark arts. At the beginning, Sal was a little bit hesitant to learn the dark arts, but soon he discovered that many rituals and spells in the dark arts could be used differently and would help him while healing others. Sal also discovered that he loved to heal. Before the apprenticeship, Sal had just thought that knowing how to heal would be useful, but the longer he learned, the more he discovered that healing was something he would like to do for a living. Morgana also noticed that he loved to heal, and so she more and more included him in her own work as a healer. It was 10 years later, the day Medrud first bested Sal in their mock battle after just a few minutes, when Morgana finally called for Sal. "Yes, mother?" he asked, entering the house. "Salva saha la fay," she stated. "Today is the day when your apprenticeship ends. You now know all I know, and there is nothing left to teach for me." Sal inclined his head. "Now there is just one thing left," Morgana continued. "The oath." Sal knew what she meant. Every healer had to vow on their magic to help everyone in need. The healer's oath would also constrict him in his magic. No healer was allowed to kill or maim others, or even simply neglect to help them when they needed help. The vow was binding and would take his life when he neglected it. "I am not sure I want to take it," Sal answered sincerely. Morgana raised an eyebrow. "I taught you healing for 10 years, and now you don't want to finalize the last step in your profession?" she asked, surprised. "A healer cannot fight," Sal answered sincerely. "And you want to fight?" "No," Sal shook his head. "I want to protect." He expected that Morgana would be angry with him for refusing to vow his life to the profession of the healer. What he did not expect was the gleam that entered her eyes when hearing his answer. "So you want to protect," she stated. "Will you try to protect everyone, with no exception, be it race, blood or something else?" Sal frowned. "Of course," he answered. "Why shouldn't I protect someone when I'm able to, and he does need help?" Now Morgana looked like a Cheshire cat. "So you will protect those who cannot protect themselves from those who try to maim them?" "I will," Sal answered, still frowning and now utterly confused. "And you will use all your skills to aid whoever needs help?" "Of course I will, even if you will have to aid your enemy." "Yes, even if you will have to kill someone or let someone die to ensure the safety of others." Sal blinked at that. "Let someone die?" "Yes," he said, unsure. "Even if it will bring you harm?" "Yes." This time he was sure. "Then I bless you, child. You are a healer, you are a warrior, you are a guardian. You have finished your apprenticeship and you have chosen your path. May you heal others, may you judge their hearts, may you guide others, may you protect them from harm. Today I name you a guardian healer, born to protect, born to judge, born to heal. So be it." A golden mist suddenly surrounded Salva and a rune circle was seen above his head. Sal had never seen this circle before. It was the typical healer rune circle in the middle, but it was surrounded by a different foreign one. Before Sal could decipher it, it glowed as bright as the sun, broke apart into sparks and entered his body. Warmth filled his entire being, and then it stopped and all was back to normal. "What?" he started to ask, but Morgana beat him to it. "A healer's oath," she answered, "but not the normal one. This one will let you protect and kill. There will be no consequences. You even can let someone die if this person has harmed others with his action, or will harm others when he continues his actions." "So, there is nothing different than before?" Sal asked, confused. "Oh, there is," Morgana answered. "Others have to come first now. You cannot do anything when you encounter a conflict. You have to aid those who need protection. You cannot aid the others, and you cannot aid evil. When you do, you will lose your magic and maybe even your life." So you tricked me in an oath, Sal said. I know you, Salvasar, Morgana said, shrugging. You would have done it anyway. You are born to protect. That you have my eyes while having also Arthur Pendragon's blood shows it. You will not feel bound at all, because of the oath. Sal cited? But he could not object. Even without the oath, he would have helped those who needed help and were too weak to aid themselves. But why did you trick me into it? It is an oath you have to give while not being aware of it, Morgana said, and even if you give it, there are few in this world whose oath would have been accepted by magic. A guardian healer is special. There are maybe 2 or 3 in this world. I guessed that you would be one 5 years ago, and I am proud that I was right. Having someone like you in our family definitely shows our superior power. Sal could just roll his eyes at that. Trust Morgana to be excited to have a rare creature like Sal in the family. There would be no other person in the world who would be concerned about family prestige. Some 1,000 years in the future. I am proud of you, Salvasar, Morgana said. I trust you will return home now. Sal stared at her for a moment, then he nodded. I will, he answered. And he truly would have, if he wouldn't have stumbled over a battle while he was on the way back to Camelot. As it was, Sal would return home 8 years later than planned. Now back to future timeline. The rest of the time until his trial, Harry had cleansed rooms with all the others. And after Kreator had told him 2 days later at night that he had cleaned a little unused room and Harry had started to draw the necessary runes, circles and pentagrams on the floor and on the walls that he needed for his first task. When the 12th of August approached, he finally had finalized the drawing, and despite being a little sleepy, he was fully prepared for the ministry hearing. Of course, no one else knew. They all relayed on Dumbledore. Dumbledore was there last night. He will come. Molly Weasley had told him, and Harry had well behaved, nodded and not shown his feelings about Dumbledore, the Almighty. Instead, he had followed Arthur to the ministry, and was finally informed about the changed time, a fact that let him grin inside. The ministry really tried to help him with all its abilities. Finally, he was brought to the courtroom. Harry grinned much more inside when he heard he would have a full trial, and left there. So he stood there, in front of them, looking around in Merlin's court. The walls were made of dark stone, dimly lit by torches. Empty benches rose on either side of him, but ahead, in the highest benches of all, were many shadowy figures. They had been talking in low voices, but as the heavy door swung closed behind Harry, an ominous silence fell. A cold male voice rang across the courtroom. "You're late." Harry turned and looked at the speaker. "I did not get a notice that the time was changed," Harry answered, crooking his head. "I also got no notice that the place was changed." The wizards and witches of the Wizengamot looked at each other and murmured, "We have been sending you an owl with the new time and place today," Fudge said coolly. "You might," Harry answered. "The point is I did not get it, so how am I supposed to be on time without knowing it was changed?" "We should not discuss that now," the witch beside Fudge said sweetly, and Harry had the unproved feeling that she had something to do with his missing message. He said nothing and filled it away for later. This just would make it easier for him. "Very well," said Fudge, the accused being present. "Finally, let us begin. Are you ready?" he called down the row. "Yes, Sir Percy." Harry had thought as much. He did not even bother to look at the treacherous Weasley brother. "Disciplinary hearing of the 12th of August, said Fudge in a ringing voice, and Percy began taking notes at once, into offences committed under the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, and the international stature of secrecy by Harry James Potter, resident at number 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Interrogators: Cornelius Oswald Fudge, Minister of Magic; Amelia Susan Bones, Head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement; Dolores Jane Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister; Court Scribe, Percy Ignatius Weasley. Witness for the defense. "You don't have to, Headmaster," Harry interrupted the entering old man mid-sentence. "I am fully capable of defending myself." Dumbledore stopped mid-step and stared at the boy in front of him. "Harry, my boy, this is the Wizengamot," he began, but Harry interrupted him again. "That's all right, Headmaster. I am fully aware where I am. I can handle myself with that. He turned to the minister and said in a non-saying voice. Please continue, Minister Fudge. The members of the Wizengamot were muttering. All eyes were now on Dumbledore and Harry. Some of them looked annoyed, others slightly frightened, but the most of them looked utterly flabbergasted. Harry guessed that the most of them had thought he would hide behind Dumbledore's robes, but Harry was not a child anymore. So while the originally Harry maybe would have let Dumbledore manage his affairs, the current Harry was not willing to give the headmaster any power in his life. Minister Fudge, would you please continue, sir? Silence for another minute. Yes, Fudge finally said, still staring at Harry and Dumbledore, who looked slightly undecided at his young charge. Finally he just flicked his wand and sat down on the squishy armchair that appeared out of nowhere. Harry ignored him. Yes, said Fudge again, shuffling his notes. Well then, so, the charges. Yes. He extricated a piece of parchment from the pile before him, took a deep breath and read out, the charges against the accused are as follows. That he did knowingly, deliberately, and in full awareness of the illegality of his actions. Having received a previous written warning from the Ministry of Magic on a similar charge, produce a Patronus charm in a Muggle-inhabited area, in the presence of a Muggle, on the 2nd of August at 9:23, which constitutes an offence under paragraph C of the Decree for the Reasonable Restriction of Underage Sorcery, 1875, and also under Section 13 of the International Confederation of Warlocks Statute of Secrecy. You are Harry James Potter of number 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey, Fudge said, glaring at Harry over the top of his parchment. Today I am, Harry answered pleasantly, knowing that the chamber would showcast it if he lied. Today? Fudge asked, slightly annoyed with Harry's answer. I might change my name tomorrow, the boy replied, shrugging. Or I might find out my parents gave me another name altogether. At this Fudge stared unbelievingly at Harry, then he shook his head and continued. You received an official warning from the Ministry for using illegal magic 3 years ago, did you not? I might, the boy replied. This is a yes or no question. Answer clearly. Fudge scowled. Then for you, yes? It might have been 3 years, and yet you conjured a Patronus on the night of the 2nd of August, said Fudge. Yes. The boy answered clearly, one eyebrow slightly up his forehead. Knowing that you are not permitted to use magic out of school while you are under the age of 17? Yes. Knowing that you were in an area full of Muggles? Of course I knew. Fully aware that you were in close proximity to a Muggle at the time? My cousin, sir. This time the witch with the monocle spoke up. You produced a fully fledged Patronus? Harry cited. He had known this question would come up. He himself might not truly be 15, but the original Harry had been, so it was natural for these wizard and witches to question his ability to produce a Patronus. Yes, it is corporal, he answered coolly. It is corporal since 3rd year. Impressive, said Madam Bones, staring down at him. A true Patronus at his age. Very impressive indeed. Harry decided to stay silent. It would do no good when he told them that a Patronus was nothing. He could kill them all without even leaving a trace, and without them knowing what was coming, even if they would look the whole time it took him to kill them directly in his eyes. Impressive, indeed. It's not a question of how impressive the magic was, said Fudge in a testy voice. In fact, the more impressive the worse it is, I would have thought, given that the boy did it in plain view of a Muggle. Think about it. We can't let such behavior unpunished. He broke the law without even regretting it. When we let him roam, we can't know what he will do next. Those who had been frowning now murmured in agreement, but the boy in front of them seemed to be fully untouched by the accusation. This time Dumbledore instead seemed to be unable to hold back. He stood, ready to defend Harry if the boy wanted it or not. But just when he sprang to his feet, the young boy in front of the Wizengamot spoke in a low, cold voice. Now, Minister, tell me what you are playing at. The boy said, and Headmaster Dumbledore, ready to defend the young boy, stopped in the middle of opening his mouth. What are you implying, boy? Fudge hissed, but his voice showed that he was slightly taken aback by the emotionless voice of the teen, cold, Avada Kedavra green eyes pierced him, judged him, and found him unworthy. I am implying several serious disregards of your own laws, the boy said, emotionless, and a whisper emerged in the crowd. Fudge turned his head from left to right, trying to stand still and being impressive. He failed. Words run through the crowd. Broken law, we? He heard. Where? Disregarding of the laws, Mr. Potter? A regal-looking lady finally asked aloud. Pray tell, what are you talking about? About several things, madam. Several broken laws specifically, the boy replied, and when one of the Wizengamot wizards opened his mouth, he overrode his attempt to speak mercilessly. Let's start with an easy example. When I used the Patronus charm to defend my cousin, I got a letter that I was expelled from Hogwarts. That was the first breaking of your laws. No one, except of the headmaster, can expel a student from Hogwarts. Trying to do it without consulting the headmaster at first ends in losing all the reminding control you have in school. Hogwarts has the right to take back the offending person's ols and newts when said person just attempted such a crime. Is that so, lad? Another very old-looking wizard asked coolly. And pray tell, where do you think you read such an offending piece of text? In your law book, my lord, the boy answered simply. This is one of your own laws. I have been quoting. Have you? Another lord asked skeptically. I don't think that anyone of the ministry would ever be for a law like that. Well, they weren't, the boy in front of them answered, and then sent a steady glance across the crowd. This is law since 1978, when Hogwarts started to open for all students in Great Britain. At that time there was no ministry. It were the lords of the ancient and noble houses who at that time were setting up the law. Some of their laws are still in use, like the one I mentioned. Is that so? The First Lord asked, interested. So you really are able to prove it? The answer of the accused was not a yes or no. Instead he intoned. By the rights of the Lords Slytherin and Gryffindor and the ladies Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, known as the Respectable and Noble School of Hogwarts. School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, located in the Highlands of Scotland next to the hamlet of Hogsmeade, is hereby declared as independent from the lordships and states, so that in times of war it will be a neutral zone. It hereby will be declared that Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry will never be part of any legal constitution. The rights and rules of Hogwarts will solely be constructed and upheld by the headmaster, teachers, founders, and acknowledged heirs of Hogwarts. Any interference from legal constitution may be punished severely. The right of punishment for interference will be by the school. By severely interference such as expelling student, the person who interfered will be held responsible and might lose their right to bear a staff because of deprivation of his school examinations. In contrast, the school will have to take in all children of magical heritage from their 11th until their 17th birthday and teach them to be respectable and noble wizards and witches. That is the law from 97-8. Stated in the law book as paragraph 20 AE. Fudge snorted, unbelieving. And pray tell, how would a mere boy like you know something like that? I can read, Minister, the boy answered and pierced the man in front of him with his eyes. Look it up for yourself when you don't believe me. The answer was shuffling of paper when Percy Weasley searched for his copy of the law book. When he found it, he started thumbing through it until he reached the named paragraph and stared at it. Well, Weatherby, Fudge asked, clearly expecting the boy in front of him to be proven wrong. He is right, Minister, Percy stuttered, still staring at the for him offending text in front of him. The boy continued, and his glare got as cold as ice. The next broken law is that no one came to Privet Drive to investigate. Since April 1146 there is a law to investigate before taking charges. Paragraph 38. AG. This law was established after there were incidents of wrongfully imprisoned persons because of lacking investigations. The gathering of the Lords found this absolutely unacceptable and established a rule of handling the broken secret status and performing magic in front of mundane people. The law was never altered after that, so that would be the second broken law in a row. The third was preventing the accused getting a legal backer for court. Instead, I am standing in front of you without anyone. Now the wizards and witches of Wizengamot shared uneasy glances. You had Dumbledore, but you turned him down, Fudge cried, still staring at the uncanny teen. He is not, nor will he ever be a legal backer. He might be my headmaster at school, but he has no training in legal rights, so even if he would back me up, he would still be another civilian who does not know all the paragraphs of the law. The boy replied coolly, You could have asked someone. When? You changed the place of the hearing today. Formerly it had been an unofficial hearing, where I wouldn't have needed a legal backer, but now it is a trial. A legal backer needs time to know the facts. Also, I am a minor. I am legally not allowed to search legal backup without my guardian. My aunt is mundane, she has no access to a magical lawyer, and I had no time to contact her and ask for legal backup. As the court, you have had a duty to see to my needs when you force me to go to court without time to contact a legal backer. This might be a newer law of the 19th century, but it is still law. As it is established in paragraph 95A, every person accused of a crime has the right to send for legal backup in court. The legal backup might be self-provided, or in case it is impossible for the accused to get one, there has to be a chance to be provided of a lawyer by the Wizengamot. Well, I had no time to brief a lawyer with my situation, also counting the change of time and place, so that it would have been difficult for my legal backup to arrive in time, yet there is no alternative to go to. The boy continued, Because of breaking these laws, I have no one who would speak for my behalf. I am accused but unable to defend myself because of your lack of following your own laws. You did not investigate. There is no recording of the scene of crime. There is no asking for witnesses. There isn't even a simple use of truth serum to investigate if I lie or if I am telling the truth. So, how will you be able to judge me when you have no witnesses, except the evidence that I used magic in front of my mundane cousin? How will you judge if my use of magic was rightfully if there is no other evidence except of your recording? There is no need of a witness except of our recording. You broke the law, you will pay for it. Fudge intercepted at that moment. I did, didn't I? Or is there a possibility that I didn't break the law? The boy said, and his killing curse eyes were blasting. You are underage? You are not allowed to use magic in your holidays, and no one is allowed to use magic in front of a muggle. The minister spluttered. As long as I am the minister, you will be punished for your crime. Even if you're celebrity, I will not let this stop me to follow the law. To follow the law? The boy stared at the minister, as if said person had said something absolutely stupid. Which law, Mr. Fudge? Clause 7 of the Decree for the Reasonable Restriction of Underage Sorcery states that magic may be used in front of a muggle in exceptional circumstances, and as those exceptional circumstances include situations which threaten the life of the wizard or witch him or herself, or any witches, wizards or muggles present at the time of the— We are familiar with Clause 7, boy, thank you very much, snarled Fudge. Of course you are, Harry answered courteously. So why have you done nothing to exclude this clause? There might have been Dementors in Little Whinging, for all you know. There were no Dementors, Fudge spluttered. Evidence, Minister, evidence, the boy said coolly. You have not sent your people to investigate the scene of crime, like you should have, and now you come and say that there were no Dementors, but you yourself can't prove it. So how come that you think that you are right? Fudge stared at the boy in front of him with hatred in his eyes. You, he started, but was interrupted by Madam Bones. The accused has a point, Minister, she said. How do we know he had not have to defend himself? The Dementors are under the control of the Ministry. There is no way that a Dementor would come to Little Whinging. The boy just tries to escape his punishment. As an underage wizard, he has to follow the rules like everyone else. No celebrity status here. Underage? The boy questioned in this moment. That is also something I am laughing about. This is also a law you have been breaking. What are you talking about now, boy? Fudge hissed, losing his cool. But there was fear in his eyes. Harry knew what the minister feared. He feared that Harry knew about his lordship, and the freedom that could come with it when he had turned 15. But Harry said nothing. He definitely would not play that card if he did not have to do it. Think about it. I'm 15, Minister. As you told the court, I am not an adult. But whatever you are telling the court, you yourself seem to forget that pretty often. Harry argued instead. What do you mean by that? By Merlin? Fudge roared, staring at Harry as if he had gone crazy. Maybe Harry had. As a minor, I don't just have duties, Fudge. I also have rights. You seem content to forget these every time I am in a situation. I do need those rights. I am fully aware about your rights, boy, Fudge cried. Are you in front of the whole court? Do you declare you are aware of my rights? Of course I am. It maybe would go without. And the headmaster, is he also aware of my rights? What has this to do with anything, boy? Fudge growled. Just let the headmaster answer my question, Harry said, shrugging. Dumbledore looked at him with confusion. Of course I am aware of your rights, Harry, he said finally softly. You know that this discussion will bring you nowhere. It really would go without. Harry ignored him. Instead, he looked at the rest of the Wizengamot. What's with you, ladies and gentlemen? Are you aware of the rights of a minor? Amelia Bones had witnessed the whole spectacle until now. Now, addressed as a part of the Wizengamot, she felt obliged to answer with a yes. Of course she was aware of his status. She was the head of the law department. She had to be aware. She just didn't know what use it had for the boy if they were aware. She stared at the young boy in front of them, looked at his cool Avada Kedavra green eyes, and saw the determination in them. And suddenly she could piece the pieces of the puzzle together. Oh, this uncannily cunning little boy. He was playing them like pipes. So you are all aware of my rights, all three. The Minister, the Supreme Mugwump of the ICW, and Chief Warlock, and the Wizengamot, Harry said triumphantly, but then stopped. His expression of triumph fainted to nothing except of cool calculation. Then you know that there is a creative precedent from 1753, he continued with less triumph in his voice. Thomas Avery, orphan and last of the House Avery, at that time, was permitted the rights of an emancipated wizard after he had been treated like that by more than one law institution. In his case, it had been the Minister, the head of the magical law department, and the head of the auras. This creative precedent was established as paragraph 26C1C in the law book. Fudge glanced at Percy Weasley, said secretary was thumbing through the law book in front of him until he found the paragraph. There is in fact a creative precedent from 1753, Minister, Percy finally confirmed, while staring absolutely stunned at the text in front of him. Well, now after you have your proof, Minister, let's continue. The boy in front of them said, Last year I have been participating in the Tri-Wizard Tournament, a tournament solely for wizards beyond their 17th year of life. I participated and I was able to compete with the other 17-year-old participants. So, as this tournament is solely for adult wizards, a guardian on my behalf had to enter me in this tournament. My guardian, as I am aware of, is my aunt. She did not enter me or permit me to enter. In school you could say, it is the headmaster who is my guardian, and he permitted it. But seeing that the tournament is solely for adults, he also recognized and therefore treated me like an adult. So he knowingly ignored my rights as a minor and forced me to participate in something a minor had no right to be in. Even if he did, this has nothing to do with your case. Fudge spluttered. Amelia Bones snorted at this. But it does, Minister, the boy answered. It is an essential part in this trial. And pray tell, how should your participation in the Tri-Wizard Tournament have any meaning in your case? Fudge growled and Amelia Bones knew the boy had him. There was no escaping now. Simple, the boy answered. He started what you finished. He treated me like an adult like you are doing now. I asked you if you are aware of the rights of a minor. I asked the headmaster and the Wizengamot the same. You all answered the positive, and still are breaking this rights without even to hesitate when it comes to me. So basically, you both, and with you the Wizengamot, agree that I am no child. Now see here, boy, Fudge grumbled. I did no such a thing, so there is no way. You did not? The boy intercepted. But you suggesting that you did? How dare you to state such a lie? But it isn't a lie, Minister, the boy answered, emotionless. Paragraph 40 ed states that only an adult is to be tried in front of the whole whizzing gamut. And here we are. Me as the accused and you who are trying me with the whole court. A simple case of underage magic is never tried with the whole whizzing gamut. So why, when I'm not an adult yet, is this different for me than for the others? This question roused another ruckus in the audience. Fudge opened his mouth just to close it again. His eyes seemed to budge out of their holes. Harry stared back at him, his death eyes fixed on him. "I still wait for an answer to that question, Minister," he said coolly. But Fudge stayed still staring at Harry as if he saw him for the first time. Finally, Madam Bones took pity on the flabbergasted man and spoke up herself. She had understood a while ago that the boy would take this route, she just didn't know why. "That is a good question, young man," she said. "Still, even if you are today treated like an adult in front of the law, what use is this for you? You still have performed a Patronus in front of a muggle." "It is simple, Madam Bones," the boy answered her. "When I am treated like an adult, I am allowed to give you my memory of the event. Then you would be able to see the facts behind my spell. Memories can't be forged without seeing the change, and displayed in the courtroom of the Wizengamot they can be freely seen by everyone." When the boy answered this question, Madam Bones hesitated for a moment, then she nodded. "Do it. The minister has been treating you like an adult, so why not looking at your memories?" "Do you know how to extract memories?" she asked. "Of course," the boy replied with an experienced tone. Something Amelia Bones never had expected from a boy of 15 years. The boy extracted a memory from his mind and stood up. Without hesitation or the need of instructions, he stepped forward to a deepening in the floor. In it he dropped the memory. Then he nodded to Madam Bones and returned to his seat. "Show," Madam Bones instructed, and suddenly the whole wall behind the boy lit up and built a visible scene. The first that they could see was absolute darkness. Then a memory of coldness began to creep into the courtroom, and not just a few of the wizards and witches shivered. Dementor cold. Then you could hear the breathing, the rasping and rattling breathes. A human cry could be heard in the darkness. The panic in the voice filled the air. "Diddley, keep your mouth shut. Whatever you do, keep your mouth shut." Then there was a muttering and a short light, where the wand lay. The boy in the memory clasped the wand. A panicked expecto patronum, just white fog, bright enough to show the Dementor creeping near the boy. Then it hit the Dementor and broke. Again. An expecto patronum and again just fog. The Dementor now just a few inches away from the boy. Its hand reached for the boy. Blackness, again. Shuffling, running steps in the darkness. And then a loud expecto patronum. A phoenix erupted from the wand of the boy, now a few feet away from the Dementor. The phoenix golden light filled the alleyway and showed another Dementor clasping another boy's wrists and wrestling with him. The boy was losing, and then the phoenix took over, drove away the Dementors with so much force that the Dementors seemed to be harmed by the creature. The memory ended and the whole court fell silent. "Dementors," Madam Bones finally said. "Dementors in a muggle suburb. That can't be real," Fudge cried. "It is a lie. Mr. Potter is using forged." "You know as well as I that a memory can't be forged without everyone recognizing it, Minister Fudge," Madam Bones interrupted him. "The young man has been telling the truth to this court. And don't forget, he showed us what happened. He did not just tell us, he showed us. How can you argue against that?" But, Fudge stuttered. "I would be quiet if I were you, Minister," Madam Bones interrupted. "I am not happy with you. You took this underage magic incident in front of the whole Wizengamot. The boy had broken the law the third time. He blew up his aunt last year, and the year before he used a hovering charm." "Did he?" Madam Bones turned around to the lad in front of her. "I did blow up my aunt," the boy answered without hesitation. "It was accidental magic." "Accidental?" "I did not use a wand or a spell. I just blew her up." The boy filled the Wizengamot in. "This is not courtable." Paragraph D of the Decree for Reasonable Restriction of Underage Sorcery states that accidental magic of a minor before his second maturity, done without a wand and without the intent to do it, is not punishable because the minor has still to learn how to fully control his or her magic. At this Madame Bones smiled. "You are right, Mr. Potter," she confirmed. "But there is still the incident with the hovering charm." "I can show you the incident," the boy answered without hesitation. "I think this time it will be enough to just tell us." "Well, but it sounds not, well, believable." "Just tell when we need to see it. You can show us afterward." "I just warned," the boy answered. "It was a crazy house elf." "A house elf?" The witch beside Fudge snorted. "And pray tell, how did a house elf get—" The boy's eyes got deadly. "I told you it is unbelievable, but when you want to, I will show you the incident." "I don't think that is necessary," Madame Bones interrupted, while staring the minister and the witch next to him, Dolores Umbridge, down. "I believe you, and even if I didn't, it was just one incident, nothing to be punished for." "But," Fudge started. "You, minister, should think about what you are saying," Madame Bones interrupted again. "Alone in this sole case you have ignored several laws, the most of them in place to have a fair trial for the accused. I will see to this when we end this case, but now, finish, and I warn you, if you even try to stall a bit, I will look through all your doings in the last few years. Even if I find nothing, you wouldn't see your office for the next 5 months. So do you have to say anything else?" "No." This time, Fudge sounded bitter. "Well then, on to the charges," Madame Bones said. "Those in favor of clearing the witness of all charges." More than 80% of the Wizengamot raised their hands. "And those in favor of conviction?" This time it was just Fudge, the witch, beside him, and a few others. Harry scrutinized them until the most of them turned their eyes away. He would have to remember them later. They were either in Fudge's pocket or Death Eater's. So simplified. They were both enemies. Fudge glanced around at them all, looking as though there was something large stuck in his throat. Then he lowered his own hand. He took 2 deep breaths and said, in a voice distorted by suppressed rage, very well, cleared of all charges." Harry smiled at that. "Thank you, Minister," he said pleasantly. "Until the next time, I would advise you to pray that we will never see each other again. But I know this will never be the case. We will see each other again, and next time, it will be less pleasant for you." With that he stood and left the room, nodding at the rest of the Wizengamot and his headmaster, but his face stayed carefully blank until he reached the floor outside the courtroom. Then a creepy smile spread over his features. Harry James, 1. The Wizengamot and the headmaster, 0. When Harry left the room, Albus could do nothing but stare at the vanishing form of the boy he had deemed the savior. Something was wrong with the boy. Albus had never seen Harry act like that before. Of course, it had been some time, some months, since he had seen the boy the last time. The last time he had seen Harry, the boy had just won the Triwizard Tournament, and his first battle against a reborn Dark Lord. Since then Albus Dumbledore had been nervous to meet the boy again. Albus, of course, knew about the Horcrux in Harry's scar, and he feared that Harry would be influenced by it. Now that Voldemort had returned, the trial today just aided to Albus's beliefs. How? How had the boy managed to get off without his help? How had the boy known all this? Albus had brought the boy to Petunia and stopped every contact the boy could have to the wizarding world, so that the boy would not be raised in the traditional ways of the pure bloods. And now the boy suddenly was acting as if he had been raised like a pure blood all along. This was not something Albus had wanted or even imagined. He had wanted Harry to be raised like a Muggle or Muggle-born. He had thought that when the savior of the wizarding world would act like a Muggle-born, that the rest of the pure blood would see the error of their ways. Albus had hoped that the pure blood would finally stop clinging to customs that were long outdated. Instead, Harry suddenly seemed to know a lot more about the lore and custom of the wizarding world than he should have. But how? Had he researched it with his friends? Albus would not be happy if he had, but he would understand that. Or had it been Voldemort's influence? Albus tried to shrug off his concern, but he couldn't. The cold voice, the emotionless face, the cool intelligence, Voldemort. The charming behavior, the cunning mind, the perfect manners, Voldemort. The knowledge about everything he needed to know, the ability to sway the crowd, the ability to induct fear, loyalty and awe. Voldemort. The boy had acted so much, maybe too much, like a charismatic and young Tom Riddle, Voldemort in all his former glory. Albus shuddered and prayed that he was wrong. He prayed that someone at Grimmauld Place had broken their promise to him and had the boy taught how to act and what to state. Because if they hadn't, there was a great chance that the connection between the Horcrux and Harry was starting to get stronger than Albus had predicted. There was just one consultation for Albus. The boy still did not know about the rule of emancipation. As long as the boy did not claim his lordship, he would stay a minor and was as such still under the guidance of Albus Dumbledore. Maybe Albus could do something to rescue the boy if he truly had given in to the Horcrux in his head. If it was the Horcrux that let him act the way he did, tonight, he decided, I will speak to the members of the Order of Phoenix tonight. Maybe one of them has done or seen something that explains Harry's behavior today. And if they hadn't, well, Albus would go there later when he had to. When Harry left the room, Fudge was fuming. How had the boy been able to get off the hook like that? How had the boy swayed the Wizengamot? Fudge had been sure that he would be able to capture the boy with that spell. He needed the boy to be captured by it. He feared that the public would follow the boy. He feared that the boy was telling the truth, and he who must not be named really had returned. The Potters were an important, powerful family. They had a large political cloud, and until now the boy had done nothing to jeopardize it. Of course, the articles about the boy last year had not been supporting the boy, but they had not been scandalous enough to slander the boy also. And the boy had won the Triwizard Tournament with 14 years of age, and the boy had killed a Dark Lord when he was a baby. Every negative press was fading away when you looked at the accomplishments of the boy, and even the articles that were printed the last few months about the boy's insanity in the Daily Prophet did not really jeopardize the political cloud the boy had. A political cloud that came from the Potter family, the deeds of James and Lily Potter, and the deeds the boy had done in his short life. The killing of you-know-who, the winning of the Triwizard Tournament, the rumors about facing a professor when he tried to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and the rumor about ridding the school of Salazar, Slytherin's monster. Even if the last two were just rumors, the power the boy had shown by killing a Dark Lord as an infant and winning the Triwizard Tournament was enough to endear him to many. The boy just had to come to the Wizengamot session in January, when the new lords would be introduced, and he would have enough power to threaten even Fudge's position as the Minister of Magic. The boy himself might be too young to be the Minister of Magic, but with his influence and power he would be able to aid Albus Dumbledore in his quest to be the new minister, and he would win. Fudge would be unable to hold his seat against two slayers of Dark Lords, but Fudge would not give up his position without a fight. He had worked for this position. He had lived for this position. He would not simply step aside. There was just one thing he could do. Daily Prophet, he announced, while stepping in the flames of his flow fire. He would visit the Daily Prophet to ensure that the boy's reputation would finally be tarnished. When Amelia Bones finally returned to her office, she hoped for a quiet evening. The trial today had been energy-sapping. She really didn't know how she felt at the moment, but she was quite sure that Fudge was definitely not her favored person today. First, he had stopped Mafalda Hopkirk from doing her duty by bringing the Potter heir in front of the Wizengamot, and then he had butchered up the whole trial by disregarding the laws he had sworn to follow, and the Potter heir had known it all along. Amelia was quite sure that the Potter heir had played them the whole time they were in court. "And I thought the boy was a Gryffindor," she mused, thinking about the things her niece had told her when she asked her about Harry Potter. At that time it had been mere curiosity that had Amelia driven to find her answers. Now she was spiked with longing to know about the boy. When the boy really is a Gryffindor, then he might have had aid. Amelia thought and sat down in the chair behind her desk. There is no way a Gryffindor would be able to come up with something like that, except the Gryffindor was a snake in a lion's fur all along. Again Amelia repeated the morning in her head. The boy had played them, but he had done it with the truth as he knew it, a feat that not even Lucius Malfoy would have easily pulled off. Amelia sighed and buried her head in her hands, just to stop and stare at a piece of parchment that was lying innocently on her table. "Do you want to be responsible for another innocent's fake trial?" There aren't just innocent Potters out there. After all, there is a black on the loose. Sometimes you have to look a second time. And sometimes you have to be a Slytherin to get justice. She blinked, but the parchment did not vanish under her unbelieving eyes. Another innocent? A black on the loose? Slytherin. It's definitely not my day. Amelia finally decided and tucked the piece of parchment in her desk. She had no desire to think about anything like that riddle in front of her at the moment. It can wait until tomorrow, she said to herself. I finish early today. And with that she left the office, not knowing that the piece of parchment would make a lot of more sense to her in the future. Even if it would take her some time to understand this twisted message at all. It was night at Grimmauld Place, No. 12. And while the children had been sent to bed some time ago, the adults weren't sleeping. Instead, more and more people entered silently the house and went to the crammed kitchen. The last one was Albus Dumbledore. He closed and locked the door behind himself before setting some wards that prevented spying. So, tell us, Albus, how was the trial? Molly Weasley asked. The boy said he was cleared of all charges, but he did not tell us more. Yes. I also want to know, Moody said grumpily, was your influence enough to let the boy off the hook? Albus Dumbledore himself cited. He was not sure how to tell the people in front of him that the boy had somehow managed to be cleared by himself, by Merlin. Albus himself wasn't even sure how the boy had managed to play the whole whizzing gamut until they had to let him go because of the evidence his memory provided. The boy was a Gryffindor for Merlin's sake. How the hell had he managed a Slytherin approach like that? It did not go like I planned, he finally said, citing. Moody and the others looked at him. So it was just luck that the boy was cleared? Moody asked. They did not accept the witness Arabella was giving. No, Albus answered, shaking his head. I never asked Arabella to enter. So how? This time it was Arthur Weasley that asked the question. I was not allowed to be the witness for the defense. Albus answered tiredly. Fudge prevented it? This time a lot of voices asked the same question. No, Harry did, Albus answered. Why? The voices asked, all except one. Sirius Black was sitting on his chair, laughing. He did stop you when you tried to rescue him. And he got of himself? That is hilarious. The animagus laughed, barking. Absolutely hilarious. Albus threw a sharp look at the laughing younger man before he answered. I do not know myself, he said, but he prevented me from interfering, and after that simply crushed the minister with his own laws. The others blinked. He used the laws to defend himself? Moody verified. Yes, Albus answered, and some of them were laws I never heard before. He wasn't even a little bit afraid when he was standing in front of them, and finally he tricked them so that he was able to show them his memory. He knew about the possibility to do that? Moody asked, astonished. He did, and he used it to its fullest. Albus answered seriously. What did he do while he was here? The Weasleys and Sirius looked at each other. He cleaned with us, Molly finally stated, and when he did not clean he was with Ron and Hermione. Once I saw him in the library doing his homework. Why? Albus cited. He had hoped that Molly and the others had seen Harry while he planned the trick he had pulled in the ministry, but they hadn't. He even wished that anyone would have helped Harry to do what he had done, because when they hadn't he was not sure how Harry had done it. And that was a terrifying thought. What, when Voldemort had helped him, was the link between these two open enough so that Harry could access the things Voldemort knew? I just wondered when he had time to prepare for the trial, he finally answered Molly. Moody looked at him sharply but said nothing until the meeting ended and the other ones had left to go home or to go to bed. You fear something, Albus, Moody said, still looking at him intensively. What do you fear? Albus cited, then decided to give away a little bit of his information. The boy has a link to Voldemort, he said, whispering. And you fear he was able to get of because he had the information the Dark Lord provided. Moody concluded. Yes, I will look out for the boy, Moody said. When he really accessed the mind of the Dark Lord, we will know it. Thank you, my friend. And with that both of them also left, not seeing the tiny figure that popped in the kitchen and loosened a tiny Muggle recorder from beneath the table. While the Order of the Phoenix held their meeting in the kitchen, in another unused room of the house, 2 other people were still awake. The room was empty and small. Once it maybe had been a room for cleaning supplies and other things you don't use in daily routine. Now it was used for something entirely different. The runes, hieroglyphs, pentagrams and circles painted on the walls, ceiling and floor of the room implied the new use of the room. It had been changed to a ritual chamber, and in the middle of this ritual chamber, 2 objects were lying on the floor. "Stand aside, Ridge," a voice whispered, and Regulus Black, who had placed the objects in the middle circle, went to another circle painted on the floor right behind the door. "Let's begin," the voice whispered again, and suddenly runes out of blue fire were drawn in the air. A moment later they vanished, and with them the little noise from outside you could hear vanished also. And then the chanting began. Regulus himself watched from his secured place at the outer side of the ritualistic circle. He had seen this scene before, but he still was unable to look away. The first time he had seen it was 10 years ago when the man in front of him had vanished, the first Horcrux they had found. At that time he had known nearly nothing about the man. He had woken up just a few weeks before that time, after a magical coma of 6 years. He had known nothing except that the man had rescued him back in 1979 from dying, and after that had looked after him until the potion in his system finally had worn off and he was able to wake up again. He stared at the other one 10 years back. It had been a man, now it was a boy. Saw him drawing runes with the glowing staff in his hands. Then the green eyes of the other suddenly lightened up in unearthly light. They glowed as if filled with little green suns. Their gaze shone on the objects he was destroying. Regulus never had seen a wizard using techniques like that. The air felt heavy and foreign. The magic flowing from the runes felt sweeter and earthy and absolutely different than the magic Reg was used to. The first time the boy had vanished, a Horcrux, Regulus had been absolutely awe-stricken. And even now, he could not look away, even when the light, the runes and lines began to glow and started to hurt his eyes. Unearthly, that was the only description he was able to. And then the chanting in a language Regulus could not place stopped and a soft hissing sound penetrated the silence. Suddenly a black fog erupted from the 2 objects in the middle of the circle. The fog tried to take on a different shape, but white glowing light hindered the forming. Again a chanting was heard, this time filled with soft hisses and words that sounded like Arabian. The purifying. The first time Regulus had seen it, he was not sure if the man in front of him tried not to invoke more evil as already was there. This time he knew it wasn't like that. In that moment black and green fire erupted from the objects and reached for the black fog. A high-pitched shriek could be heard when the fire began to consume the fog. Then the fog vanished in the flames. It took another moment and then the unnatural fire also vanished, leaving behind the untainted Hufflepuff cup and Slytherin locket. The boy sighted and disabled the runes and the runic circle. Then he simply fell to his knees, totally spent. Regulus left his corner to hurry to the boy's side. "Are you okay?" he asked the boy. "I am. Just tired. Help me to bed?" Regulus sighted, feeling relieved that the boy seemed all right. "Let me clean you up, then I will bring you to bed," Reg said and conjured a flannel and some water to rub away the runes and hieroglyphs Harry had painted in blood on his body. "Thanks," the boy said when finally the last drop of blood was cleaned from his naked chest. "I hate this ritual. In other rituals the blood would simply vanish after I finalized the ritual. I don't know why it is different with that one." "Maybe because you are destroying something," Regulus guessed. Harry looked at the objects in front of him. "Maybe," he said, and then came to his feet with a little help from Regulus. "Maybe." Regulus opened the door and stopped listening. Nothing. Silently they crept downstairs to the room Harry shared with Ron. There Regulus opened the door to look in. Ron was sleeping soundlessly, so they were safe. They entered, and Reg helped Harry to bed. "Thanks," Harry said. Reg just snorted. "You did the whole work. Bringing you to bed is definitely the easier part." Harry just rolled with his eyes. "Nevertheless, thanks." Reg smiled at him. "Sleep, Harry. We wouldn't wake Ron now, would we?" "Definitely not." Harry answered, yawning, and then closed his eyes. Hide the objects, will you? Of course. Hide yourself as well. Sure. Harry yawned again. Sleep, Harry. Will do. And with that, the boy closed his eyes and fell asleep. Regulus looked down at the boy he had sworn to help. Now asleep, the boy looked absolutely harmless. Regulus took the glasses of the boy and put them on the table beside the bed. He sighted. A child. He was following the advices and command of a child. When he would not know that the boy in front of him was older than he looked, he would declare himself crazy. He shook his head. Let's start the beginning of the end, he whispered, sighting and still head-shaking. Let's see what's left after you are through with them. And with that he left the room to hide the Horcruxes and finally to go to bed himself. Sometime in year 35 AD, Sal sliced the enemy. One moment his opponent still stood there, frozen in time, then he simply fell. His body hit the floor, his blood trenching the earth and his head rolling off to cuddle to one of his allies. Sal turned away, used to the gruesome pictures death could paint. He stopped one moment to check his right shoulder. The opponent's blade had ruined his leather armor and sliced his flesh. He changed his sword arm, swinging the long knife with his left instead with his right. No problem. He had learned fighting with both hands years ago, and the damaged one still could use his staff. Then his attention turned to his head. He had a bump where a shield had hit him and did not wear a helmet anymore. Blood had clumped his hair and he had to remove some blood from his eyebrows, which was threatening to fall into his eyes. Head wound. He felt a little bit dizzy, but it was nothing he could not cope with. All right, he thought, and turned again to the battle. Still a few to go, and so he went on, searching for a comrade in need, battling the enemy with all he had, be it magic, knowledge, or soul strength. He joined the battle, still aware of the enemy and the tiny huts behind him, just protected by his long knife and his will. Several hours later, the battle had succumbed. Here and there were still fighting pairs, but the most of the invaders had been killed, had fled or were prisoners. Sal sighed and looked again at his hurt shoulder. He had had no time to cleanse it or to bandage it. He had just used a spell to stop the blood flow and had went on. Now he touched his wound, really looked at it, and sighed. There was no way that this would not scar. He knew that. He had learned that a long time ago. With practiced moves he removed his tunic and cleansed the wound. The pain was horrible, but he had to do it. Gangrene was nothing he could afford to have. Hey, need help there, my friend? Sal looked up and saw a goblin coming in his direction. This looks pretty awful, the goblin said, taking a look at Sal's shoulder. It will heal, Sal answered confidently. It will, the goblin answered. And now let me do this. I will treat it temporary until you can find someone to treat this. I might not be a healer, but I am a good first aid. Sal smiled at the goblin. I am a healer, he said, still smiling. Don't worry, it's nothing grave. It must be cleansed and bandaged. With some potion-laced bandages, it will heal by itself in a few weeks. The goblin raised an eyebrow. You're a healer? He asked, astonished. Are you human healers so bad at your profession that you have to go to battle to get some praise? No, Sal answered, laughing. I did not join the battle for praise. I had to defend the village. He gestured to the still-standing village a few yards away from the battlefield. I joined as soon as the invaders broke through the defense. I could not let them enter the village and hurt the children. The goblin looked back at the village, then at Sal. I never heard of a healer joining a battle, he said. No goblin healer ever would think of that. I thought the human healers were much the same. They normally are, Sal answered, while letting the goblin bandage him. But I am no normal healer. You're not? The goblin asked while wrapping the gauze around Sal's shoulder, but then he nodded. Yes, you're definitely not, he said. A children defending battling healer is not usual, but a human healer defending a goblin village against humans is definitely odd. Sal blinked at these words. He knew he had had no regular contact with other druids, but surely, so you want to tell me that normal druid never would have thought of defending the village, just because they're goblins? He asked, astonished and appalled. The goblin looked at him oddly. That's the usual behavior. he said, staring at Sal as if he was a foreign species. Did your master never tell you something like that? With this question he turned Sal's head, looking at the head wound. Why should she? Sal asked, blinking and forgetting that the goblin would maybe know the names. He continued. Medrod and I never heard her say something against any other creature. Well, except of Medrod's father. She hates Arthur's guts. Medrod! Arthur? The goblin asked, now clearly stunned. Then suddenly he grabbed Sal's chin and turned his head so that Sal had to look in his eyes. The death-green eyes of the healer met the warm brown eyes of the goblin warrior. Were the buried treasures, the goblin exclaimed, still staring at Sal, but now with absolute worship in his eyes. You're Morgana's son. Sal was baffled. He said. I'm not Medrod. Of course you're not, child, the goblin answered, bemused. You told me about your brother before. Hey? Now hush, child. My clan will help you now. You need some rest. But it's all right, child, the goblin said, shaking his head. I know most of the druids don't like your mother, but you can't deny your ancestry. You have inherited her eyes. I know, Sal answered while letting the goblin cleanse his head wound. She was not sure if she really liked it that I had her eyes while Medrod. So Medrod hasn't Morgana's eyes. That's something new, even for the goblin. The goblin said, interested. Well, no, Sal answered, still a little stunned. He couldn't. He has not the right mind concept to inherit them. He hasn't the people-saving thing you must have to inherit the line of Pendragon, and because the LeFay line has mixed with Pendragon, he also hadn't the right mindset for the LeFay line's green eyes. It's complicated. So you inherited the family magic of LeFay because you're not Pendragon? The goblin asked, interested, while also starting to bandage Sal's head. Sal rolled his eyes. I am Pendragon, he said. But unlike Medrod, I unfortunately have inherited this people-saving thing, or why do you think I am a healer and have joined a battle I would definitely have done without? The goblin chuckled. I see, he said, and let Sal go. I am Valand, by the way. Salva Sahar, Sal answered. The goblin raised an eyebrow at the name. That's a mouthful, he said. Sal stared back. Not more than Valand, he countered. The goblin laughed. You might be right, Morgana, he answered, still chuckling. You might be right. It's Salva Sahar, Sal corrected. I know, Morgana, the goblin answered. I know, and now up with you. We should bring you to a healer. Later, Sal answered. First I have to aid the wounded. You're hurt yourself, the goblin countered, but Sal would hear nothing of it. It is my duty to heal, he said. I am born with gifts. I will not let these gifts go unused just because I have some scratches. The goblin blinked, surprised. Then he chuckled again. Ever thought about living with us goblins for a while, he asked. Sal shrugged. No, he answered truthfully. Never. I have lived with the elves and some other firbolg, but it just happened. I never thought about living with any of them until I did. Why? Well, because I would invite you too, Valand answered. You seem to fit in our culture without trying, so why not testing to live with us? Sal stared at the goblin in front of him, trying to figure out why he had been invited. I am not Morgana's son, he finally said, thinking that the invitation might base on that. Whatever you say, Morgana, the goblin answered while following Sal from patient to patient. Whatever you say. Somehow Sal doubted that the goblin really did believe his words. But now he had no time to argue with the goblin. Instead he had a job to do, and a horrible job it was. The goblin had won against the wizards, but the price was high. Sal finally decided to put the most of the wounded in stasis, and continue on. He would have to treat them later. Now he had to try and put as much under stasis as he could to save their lives. What are you doing? Valand asked him while following him over the battlefield. Stasis runes, Sal answered. Most of them are too hurt to live on without them. I have to stop their death before healing them. Finally, the rest of the small battles succumbed and other healers started to fill the battlefield. Put them under stasis and move on, Sal advised. There are too gravely hurt to heal them thoroughly now. For the less hurt, use simple first aid. We have to stop the dying first. The other healers followed his advice instantly. No one questioned his authority. Maybe no one dared to question it. Sal was an experienced healer. He was field healing people since more than 500 years, even if he was healing professionally just since 10 years, and his experience was showing in everything he did. Sal did not know it, but all the others, goblin and wizard alike, could see the aura of authority and power around his person. No one dared to question it. And Sal was right. They worked 3 days straight before the last stasis charms could be lifted. Later this battle would be written down as the Great Battle of the North Fields, and it would be marked as the battle with the least dead. But while Sal was working with the stasis charms and all his abilities, he never thought of history. He just saw the lives that threatened to end, and his ability to prevent it. Of course he could not rescue all. Some were injured too much and some had died while the battle was still on, but a lot of deaths could be prevented. When it finally ended, Sal was utterly exhausted. His shoulder hurt and he could not see straight anymore. He finally just succumbed to his exhaustion and fell unconscious after he ended the final stasis of the last of the wounded. He woke up 2 days later in the care of the goblin healers. Next to his bed stood Valand and another, more impressive-looking elderly goblin. Both goblins looked a lot alike, so Sal guessed that the older goblin was Valand's father. "So you are finally awake, Morganath," Valand said, looking down at him. Then he gestured to the elderly goblin. "My father Gryffindor," he said. "Father wanted to see you as soon as you wake up." The other goblin scrutinized him. "We are impressed," he finally declared with a voice that sounded like coming from a tomb. "We goblin never have seen someone like you before. Being able to cast stasis charms like that and after that healing the wounded, impressive." Valand nodded enthusiastic. "Now we know why your mother is feared by so much druids," he added while showing his teeth slightly. "Sal would later learn that it was an expression to show your gratitude." Sal just blinked, surprised and a little bit unsure. He still felt tired and it took a moment before he could catch on. "I am a healer," he finally said, trying to downplay his deeds. "I am here to prevent death as good as I can. I had to give my all." The other elderly goblin snorted. "And that you did, first shielding our young and old ones, and after that rescuing our warriors, and you even aren't one of us." Sal just shrugged. "It does not matter," he answered. "Oh, but it does," Gryffindor said. "As chieftain of the Goblin Nation, it is my duty to repay the debt we have. But what is enough to repay the debt of our lives? There is not enough gold on this earth to repay what you have done for us." "I do not need repayment," Sal answered. "And you aided me when I was hurt. That should be repayment enough." "But it isn't," Valand and Gryffindor insisted before Gryffindor continued. "I spoke with the Elder Council. We decided there is just one way to repay you. We will make you one of us. You will be a clan leader and your family will be part of the Goblin Nation." Sal stared at him unbelievingly. "I thought you would not let druids join your world." "Normally we don't. But you are special," Gryffindor answered, shrugging. "Even if there are some elders who would like it more if you were a febold like us and not a druid." He grimaced. Sal stared at the grimacing goblins in front of him. Then he finally decided to ease the unease the two goblins were feeling. "I am not human," he said, and Valand and Gryffindor blinked surprised. "Mother was an old one, and father also. I cannot be a human because I do not have a human soul at all," Sal explained, and suddenly Gryffindor grinned. "So I am able to present you as a Basilisk-born, and as such as a mixed Basilisk." Gryffindor summarized. "Well, yes," Sal answered nervously. "But you don't have the abilities of your inheritance?" Valand asked, interested. "Well, some I have," Sal answered. "I can heal with my tears like the phoenix I am descendant from, and I am poisonous like the basilisk." Sal decided to skip that he also could kill someone with his gaze, or the fire of Arthur if he really wanted to. He also skipped the family magic of Morgana. It would not go over well to frighten the goblin. Gryffindor instead grinned like a Cheshire cat. "Did you use your tears to heal some of the goblins?" he asked, interested. Sal just shrugged. "Some," he answered, "but they are my last resort. It is tiring to produce tears to heal." They are laced with my magic, and as such I will tire if I use them too often. The goblin just nodded. That would explain why a phoenix does not often heal others with its tears, he said thoughtfully. Their power might be unbelievable strong, but the price they pay is high, so they save it for the last resort. Sal just shrugged again. Maybe, he answered, not really caring. Well, he did not care until he remembered his second year at Hogwarts and the fight with the basilisk. Fawkes had done everything to aid him. He even had finally healed him. Why? When it took as much strength as it did for Sal, why did the phoenix heal him at all? His thoughts were interrupted by Valand. Are you able to stand up, Morganath? He asked. Sal nodded tiredly. He slowly stood up and followed, father and son, out of the cottage he was in. They still were in the village Sal had helped to defend, but now the marketplace of the village wasn't deserted like it had been while the fighting had taken place. Instead, a council of several old goblins was waiting for them. So this is the human that defended us, chieftain, one of the old goblins said. He is the one who defended us. Gryffindor answered, but my son was mistaken. He isn't a human at all. As soon as he said that, the atmosphere changed. Where there had been distrust before, there was suddenly a hopeful surprise in the air. So, what is he then, if he isn't a druid? The same old goblin said. He is a Basilisk-born, a child of the Basilisk, and his soul is as non-human as ours. Valand replied for his father. And do you have other evidence than his words? The old one asked. Several of our warriors have been healed by phoenix tears. That is something the healers have told us themselves. What we did not know was that it had been his tears, as he is a phoenix-born. Gryffindor answered. Have you seen it yourself, chieftain? No. Then you did believe him because he told you that, the old one said. We cannot believe something on hearsay. I don't think that Morganath would lie to us, Valand answered for his father. There is no reason. He trailed off when suddenly murmurs erupted between the old goblins. Then the speaker of them stepped forward until he reached Sal and turned his face so that he could see Sal's eyes. You really have Morgana's eyes, he said, surprised. Tell us, are you really her son, as Valand said, or are you simply someone who has eyes like her? Sal opened his mouth to deny his relationship with Morgana, but instead he answered, I am her son. With whom, child? My fathers are Arthur Pendragon and Mirden Emrys. When he closed his mouth again, he saw a rune flicker in the air, a truth rune. Sal cursed inwardly. He had been asked if he was Morgana's son. As she had adopted him, he really was, even if she hadn't birthed him. As he could not lie, he had told them the truth. And this truth contained that he was Morgana's son, if he wanted or not. So you are Medrod? No, my name is Salvasaha. I am the younger one. And he was, as he had been adopted by Morgana after Medrod had been born. And suddenly the elder goblin smiled. It was a little bit frightening to see the sharp teeth of the goblin, but Sal dismissed the unsettling feeling he had and crafted a mask on his face. The son of Morgana Le Fay and Arthur Pendragon, the goblin finally said, forgetting that Sal also had added Mirden's name to his parents. A child born to two families that are still counted as Basilisk among us, even if they truly are the descendants of Basilisk. As your parents both are counted as one of us, there is no problem to count you as a Basilisk as well. So there is no objection in claiming him as kin to us, goblin? Gryffindor asked with a raised eyebrow. None at all, chieftain. Forgive me, I doubted your lead. As you shouldn't have, Gryffindor said coolly, but then he nodded and turned to Sal. Welcome home, Morganath, child of Morgana and Arthur. Welcome to the way of the goblin. Years later, Sal would learn that those words were the traditional greeting a chieftain or a clan leader greeted a newborn babe. And now, Valand said, we will do something against that pitiful thing you call a weapon. I could not stand the sight of this thing in battle, and I definitely will not let a clan leader of the goblins run around aimed with garbage. Sal stared at the goblin, then his gaze followed Valand's gaze to his short sword. It has aided me well, he finally said, and Valand snorted. It is nothing a respectable goblin would be seen with, Valand said. You are a clan leader. You would die before carrying a thing like that. I would. Yes, Valand replied. And now come along. I will craft you weapons that are worthy of a healer, defender and clan leader. With that he turned and Sal, still feeling a little bit lost, followed the goblin after being literally pushed by Gringood to follow Valand. Valand was still muttering under his breath about a healer carrying garbage to battle. Sal decided not to comment. He knew his sword was not as good as Arthur's Caladwech, which had been embodied with magic by merging himself. But Sal still thought that his sword was not garbage. Valand brought him to a blacksmith shop, a shop that Sal learned a minute later that belonged to Valand himself. Sal soon learned that even highborn goblins like Valand were working in professions like smiths or farmers. They were highborn, but they worked like all the other when they had time to do so. So, let's look for a suitable steel for your sword, Valand said, pulling out a weird-formed amethyst. Embed your magic in there, please, he said. I will be able to work like that much better. All right. Sal softly pulled inwardly at his magic until he was able to lead it into the stone in the hands of the goblin. The goblin examined the stone, one eyebrow raised. You've got an interesting soul, he finally declared, and suddenly grinned. I will love to craft you some weapons. Oh, where to start? You need some knives. You're definitely better when fighting with knives, but also a sword. No goblin leader should go without a sword. All right, Sal said hesitatingly when he heard the enthusiastic goblin rumble. Silver. You need definitely goblin silver for your weapons. We will embed shadows in your knives and emeralds, maybe, and yes, that will fit. Rubies for your sword. Of course, also silver. Your magic is not fit for gold. When you think so, Sal answered while watching the goblin running through his working place, throwing things left and right. Diamonds, sapphires, steel blocks and gold landed on the floor while the goblin searched for who knows what. Well, that should be enough, the goblin finally said, his hands full with silver, rubies and emeralds. We will start with the knives. They will be fantastic. And the goblin was right. Sal watched Valand while he crafted the knives. There were 4 of them, 2 throwing knives and 2 long knives. When Sal finally had them in his hands, he just stared at them. Engraved just beneath the hilt of the long knives were the words Salvazar on the first and Morganet on the second. The blade of all 4 knives looked like touchable shadows, and the engraving glowed in an unearthly, eerie green light that matched Sal's eyes. Perfect, Valand had commended when he handed the knives to Sal. They are absolutely perfect. Then he had returned to his working place to craft the sword. When the goblin handed the sword to Sal, Sal recognized it instantly. It wasn't the first time he was holding this sword. Years ago, and at the same time years in the future, he would hold it again. There was just one different. This sword had no inscription beneath its hilt. It was made of silver and rubies, and a tiny basilisk and phoenix graced the hilt, but the inscription Godric Gryffindor was missing. Sal stared at the sword. A masterpiece, Valand said, and definitely better than the garbage you used to carry. It just needs a name, and then it is ready. A name? Valand huffed. Of course a name. Every sword needs one. Name it and claim it. I have no idea. I never had to name a sword before. No wonder when you just were wearing garbage. I also wouldn't have named that thing you were carrying before. Sal wisely decided not to commend on Valand's words. Now, since he had the sword in his hands, he could understand why Valand was claiming Sal's sword was garbage. The sword in his hands simply seemed to fit, like an extra limb. Well, will you stare at it until I am old and grey, or will you claim it? I never... Just look at the sword and say the first thing that comes to your mind aloud, Valand answered. Sal still looked at the goblin quizzically, but then returned his gaze to the blade. It glowed in the light of the fire it had come from, and in his mind he saw it coming out of the head like the legend said Excalibur had come out of the stone, and before Sal could stop himself he said, Excalibur. Valand stared at him. Excalibur, he repeated. In gobbledygook that means Basilisk-born. An interesting choice of a name for a sword, a fitting name when you look at the bearer. Basilisk-born, Ep3, it is, and runes etched itself in the hilt, stating the name. For a moment they glowed and shimmered over the blade itself, then the runes vanished, leaving an unblemished blade and hilt. And Sal's only thought was, what have I done now? He would find out years later. For the next 8 years, Sal continued to live with the goblins. He learned a lot from them. He learned to fight with his knives. He learned to speak the language and to act like a goblin. He even learned to craft himself because Valand insisted, and maybe he would have stayed longer, wouldn't have one day traveled news to them. The Romans have come to Britannia, the messenger said. There was a battle with King Arthur and his men. They were able to defeat the Romans for now, but more are coming, and the king's sword, the sword of his father that Merlin had put into the stone until Arthur was old enough to claim it, has been shattered. Arthur is wounded and there are rumors that he will not see another day. When the news reached Sal, he turned to Gryffindor and Valand, who had become his family at the goblins. I have to go home, he told them. Home? Gryffindor asked, interested, and Sal sighed. I might have been taught by my mother the way of the Lafay, but I have been living with my father before that. I cannot stand by and watch my father die. I am a healer. I am his son. It is my duty to heal him to the best of my abilities. And Gryffindor smiled. You're a good child. Your parents should be proud of you. Return home. But don't forget, you will always have a place to live in our nation. You have a vault in your name. You have a sword that shows your status. You are a clan leader of the goblins. You have the right to turn to us if you need us. With that said, he let Sal go. And that was the time when Sal was first and forever adopted by the goblins. Year 43 AD. When Salazar finally returned, Arthur was lying on his deathbed. You're home, Sal. Lancelot greeted Sal, surprised. Did you hear? Are you back because of your father Arthur? How is he? Sal answered in return while shrugging of his travel cloak. Dying. Lancelot answered sincerely. We have kept it from leaking to the public, but we will not be able to keep quiet any longer. He will not survive another fortnight. Let me see him, Sal said. Of course, Lancelot answered and started to lead the way. You're his son and heir. You have the right to see your father. Sal was led to where later would be the headmaster's office and climbed the stairs until he reached the top and the bedchamber of Arthur. It was still strange to enter in a room, Sal knew, and instead of seeing the expected office, stumbling over a bedchamber, the bedchamber was richly decorated with gold and red. Sal turned out the Gryffindor colors of the room and looked at the man in the huge bed in the center of the room. Arthur was deadly pale. Next to his bed was sitting Merlin, also pale and definitely exhausted from sleepless nights. In the corner stood 2 other men, discussing things in soft voices. Sal greeted his father Merlin. How is Arthur? Salazar, he saw the delight in his father's eyes even if they were still mostly haunted and sad. I am glad that you are home. Arthur will need you to take over his duties until— Don't, Sal interrupted. Don't say it. Let me look at him. I am here to try to heal him. Sal, I am a healer. Accurate. I have my oath. Let me take a look at him. Sal interrupted Merlin before he could say another word. Merlin looked at him astonished. A healer? He asked. But, guardian healer, Sal corrected, and understanding filled his father's eyes. And now let me take a look. Merlin stepped aside and Sal sat down on the edge of the bed. He freed Arthur from his covers and the gauzes that covered his chest. The wound beneath looked bad. It was red and swollen and oozing pus, definitely infected with gangrene, maybe also blood poisoning. Sal sighed and started to search his girdle for the potions and herbs needed. Then he looked at the room itself. The best would be to add a runic circle to the healing, he finally said. One of the men in the corner sneered. I don't think you have the experience to decide anything like that, lad, he said while gritting his teeth. Sal opened his mouth to retort but was beaten to it by Lancelot. Prince, Harolder, he said, coolly. I will not tolerate disrespect against Arthur's son and heir. The man, Harolder, turned to Lancelot, and then stared at Sal again. "Prince?" he repeated. "He is King Arthur's son and heir, yes," Lancelot said. "Next time think before you disrespect someone." "Sir Lancelot," Sal just stared at the older man. "As important etiquette is, that's not the time and place to discuss it." "Of course, my Prince," Lancelot answered, slightly bowing to Sal. Sal just sighed. The older man had begun to act like that in front of foreigners since Sal had been adopted by Arthur. So instead, to try and stop Lancelot from behaving formal, he turned to Harold. "You're a healer, I suspect?" he asked softly. "I am, my prince," the man answered. "We both are. We have tended to your father since he has been wounded. There is nothing that could rescue his life anymore. Please accept our judgment." "I am a healer myself, Healer Harold," Sal answered. "These wounds might be grave and maybe beyond my healing abilities, but there is still a chance for my father to heal again. It's a bit of a risk, but it cannot get worse than it actually is. You might be a healer, my prince, but you are young. You have no experience." "The great battle of the North Fields," Sal interrupted the man. The healer stared at him. "Why are you stating a battle between our neighbor Druid Kingdom and the goblins which took place 8 years ago, my prince?" The healer asked, confused. "Do you know how many goblins died that day?" The man snorted. "Inexplicable few. They must have had a wonder healer as their lead healer that day." Sal smirked. "The lead healer was me," he said. Lancelot, Merlin and both of the healers stared at him, astonished. "So please don't tell me I do not have enough experience to judge, Healer Harold. But still, I will try to heal him my way." Sal interrupted the stammered words of the second healer. "It cannot get worse. Why not trying my way? After all, I have proven that I am able to do the nearly impossible. Where is your proof, gentlemen?" Both of the healers spluttered, but then bowed their heads. "As you wish, my Prince," Harold said. "But we will leave before we do not want to be judged when the king dies." Sal just shrugged. "Then leave now," he answered absent-mindedly. "I have other things to do, Sir Lancelot. I need apples, clean earth and rosemary. This should be able to strengthen my runic work." "As you wish, my prince," Lancelot answered, and left the room to tell a servant to fetch what Sal wanted. The two healers also left the room behind him. Merlin instead stayed. "Are you sure, son?" he asked softly. Sal inclined his head. "It might go wrong, but I am quite sure that there is a high chance that I will be able to heal him." Merlin nodded and then asked, "Should I leave the room?" "Not needed. When you leave the corner of the bed it will be enough," Sal answered. In that moment Lancelot returned and Sal started with his runic circle. He saw his father's eyebrows rising when the circle started to take forms under the constant working of Sal's staff. "I have never seen a circle like that before," Merlin whispered, but Sal heard him nevertheless and shrugged. "I thought it up when I saw how bad the wound is that Arthur maintained." Merlin stared at him in surprise. "You thought it up? So that's nothing you have learned somewhere while you—" "It's a combination of some circles, I know," Sal answered. "It should aid me quite well." And then he took out one of his knives and started to hack the apples until they were nothing more than mash. He added the rosemary and the earth and started to cover the outer line of his runic circle in it. "A protection against the evil," Merlin said, understanding in his voice, "a way to strengthen the runic circle against the infection in the wound." "I would never have thought to do something like that." Sal let his father ramble and activated instead the circle with some hisses in parcel tongue. "Aid me in my task," he hissed. "Heal, protect, destroy what wants to destroy a life." The circle glowed and activated. Then Sal turned to the wounded and unconscious Arthur and took the knife he had used to prepare the apple and rosemary. He took the knife and opened the wound with it without cleansing it before. Apple and rosemary filled the wound and the magic of the circle reacted and hissed. Where apple and rosemary touched the wound, the gangrene started to leave it even faster than it would have without the magical cleansing. But some parts were too deeply infected and the magical cleansing did not work on them. Sal gritted his teeth and then sliced them away with his knife. It was gruesome and took some time, but finally the wound was clean, but bloody. The blood was flowing freely again, and Sal knew that it would be deadly to let it flow. And there was just one way to stop it. "I am sorry, Father," he said to Arthur, then took one of the potions and made Arthur swallow it. It was the draught of living death. It guaranteed that Arthur would stay asleep for the whole ordeal. Then he took his knife again. A flame erupted in his left hand, and the knife was heated in it. When it finally was hot enough, Sal turned to Arthur and pressed the knife on the wound. It hissed and stank when the flesh burned, but the blood flow stopped. "What?" Lancelot asked with huge eyes. "I needed to stop the blood flow," Sal answered. "The most effective way was to cauterize it." Then he looked at the wound again. It looked better. Not healed fully, but definitely better than before. Sal sighed and then added runes in Arthur's blood on Arthur's wrists, forehead and ankles. After that he crushed some herbs and added them on the wound before he added a few different runes in blood on Arthur's chest, where beneath was beating the heart. "What are you doing?" Lancelot asked, whispering. "Blood cleansing," Sal answered. "Not easy, but Arthur's best chance to survive." And with that he started chanting. While he chanted, he used another potion to rub it on Arthur's bare chest. And finally, after a time that felt like eternity, dark mist began to rise from Arthur's chest. As soon as the dark mist came in contact with the circle, it vanished with a hiss. When the last of the dark mist left Arthur's body, the body began to glow an eerie yellow light, and Sal stopped chanting after the last of the mist vanished. Sal trembled. He felt utterly exhausted and his body was covered in sweat. But he had not finished healing yet, so he returned to his task with the same iron will that had aided him in every other thing he had accomplished so far. In that moment Sal wished he hadn't aged himself again so that he fit with the age he officially was on Arthur's court. Changing his age was a magically straining act. Healing a wound like Arthur's afterwards was definitely not really easy. But Sal had to age himself. He would have been unable to explain how he had gotten younger again if he had turned up without aging himself beforehand. Then Sal turned away from his thoughts and turned to Arthur's healing instead. He took another potion and started to rub it on wrists, forehead, ankles and chest at the exact spots where the runes had been before. After that he added another potion on the wound and finally covered it in gauze again. Then he made Arthur swallow some more potions before finally destroying the outer circle containing of the apple rosemary earth mash. "Now we will have to wait how he will take this," Sal said tiredly and stood up, swaying. "You're exhausted." Madame said. "I am," Sal answered, rubbing his eyes. "Would one of you stay with him? I want to know if his condition worsens. When it doesn't, when will he wake up?" Lancelot asked, looking at Sal as if he saw him the first time. "In 2 or 3 weeks, Sal answered honestly. The draught of living death was enough to let him stay asleep for 2 weeks, but there is no guarantee that he will not take longer to wake up. When it takes so long to wake up from it, why giving it to him at all?" Merlin asked. Sal sighed. "He needs to heal. When he would wake up and feel better, he would want to stand up. He cannot. Also, the agony of the healing I did would have driven the strongest man insane. I would not have risked this method without the draught." Merlin nodded thoughtfully. "I will accompany you," he finally said. "I would worry that you did not make it to your chamber when I wouldn't. You're after all nearly asleep on your feet," and that he did. Sal made it to his bedchamber. He also made it to his bed, but he just fell down on it without changing out of his clothes and fell asleep before his head even met the pillow. Modin sighed and carefully changed his son in some clothes that were more comfortable for sleeping. Then he bowed down and kissed the boy on his temple. "You're a miracle, child," he whispered. "One day you will have an impact, the whole druidic world. I am just sorry that I will never be able to see it." And with that he left his son and returned to Arthur's bedchamber. He was sure that the king would survive. Sal had proven that he would not let his second father die, and Sal had the will to lead Arthur back to the land of living. And he did. Arthur healed while Sal played his role and ruled over the people, and when Arthur was finally well enough, Sal returned the throne to his father. "Well, I have my seat back," Now I just need a new sword and everything is fine, Arthur joked when he sat down for the first time. Sal just shrugged, opened his girdle and freed the shed of his own sword from it. You can take that one, he said. As my father, you have the right to carry it if you want. Arthur just stared at the sword, then he took it hesitatingly and drew it. A magnificent blade, he said softly. Sal shrugged. It was made for me by the goblins, he answered. Then I cannot take it, Arthur said. It is yours to carry. I carried it for the last 8 years, Sal said. It's time that it sees the hands of a real swordsman. You are a real swordsman, son, Arthur said. Sal just snorted. I am a knife fighter, father. I have never been a swordsman. I may know how to fight with a sword, but that does not make me a swordsman. I would stand no chance against you or Lancelot. You are young. I am furthermost not good with a sword, Sal said softly. I will never be as good as some others, and you will have to accept that like I accepted it a long time ago. Arthur just sighed. I know, he finally said. But still, Sal just closed his second father's hand around the hilt. Just take it, he said. You're my father, you have the right to carry Excalibur. Excalibur, free from the stone? Sal snorted. It's not Latin, father, he said. It sounds like Latin for free from the stone, Arthur said. What do you mean with Excalibur? Excalibur, my sword, Sal corrected. Arthur stared at him for another minute, then he nodded and took it. Thank you, my son, he said softly. Sal just shrugged. You are my father, you are the king, you have the right for a good sword, and a goblin made is better than every other sword. After that, he left the great hall. Arthur instead took the sword, and soon the legend of the sword from the stone, Excalibur, started to fester in the minds of the public. Later it would be an important part of Arthur's legend. Will you stay? Merlin had followed Sal after he had left the great hall. Sal stopped. He did not turn, but stared the way he had been heeding. He knew Merlin was a very old man. He would not last much longer. Sal could see death lurking in the shadows, watching his father. Merlin. I will stay, he finally answered softly. I would not leave you if you asked me to stay. You do not have to stay. I know you are searching for a way back home in the future. Merlin said softly. Sal turned and looked at his father. You're my father, he told the old man. I love you. I would never go searching for a way home when you need me. Don't forget I have a life in both times, but you will not have me anymore when I return to where I came from. This time the old man sighed. I do not want to stop you, Sal, he said. You don't, Sal answered. I have time to go home. I will stay as long as you need me. And with that said, Sal stayed. He stayed at his father's sides when the kingdom had a time of peace, and he stayed even then when war returned to them. He stayed when 60 AD the Romans entered Britain and started to conquer not only the mundane, but also the magical part of the island. Not that there was a great difference between those two at that time. He stayed when Medred came to their father to demand his rightful place at Arthur's side, and he also stayed when Arthur refused to acknowledge Medred as his son and heir. Why? Didn't you? Was the only thing Sal wanted to know after Medred had stormed out on them. Because he might be my son, but he definitely isn't my heir, Arthur answered softly. But you are my heir. You are my eldest son. Even if Medred would have inherited my magic, he still wouldn't have been my heir. Would have? He hasn't, Arthur answered, shrugging. I saw it as soon as he started to demand his rightful place. He cares furthermost for himself. He does not care enough for others to have my magic, of course. If he would have had it, or if he wouldn't have demanded his place, I would have given him a place in my home. He is of my blood after all, even if I never married his mother. I don't think he understood why he was rejected. Sal said sincerely. He knew his brother. He knew that Medred would hold a grudge against Arthur for rejecting him. I told him I would welcome him when he stopped to demand things I am not obligated to give him. Arthur answered softly. If he can't understand something like that, then he has no place in my court. Not a moon circle later, Medred returned with the Romans and the intent to destroy everything his father had built. and while Sal accompanied the druids to defend the fleeing villagers and the village and castle they were hiding in, Arthur and Medrod started to fight each other. When Sal saw that they were losing, he did the only thing he could. As the son of Arthur and Myrddin, the ward holders of Camelot, he also had access to the wards, so he reached for them and forced them to hide Camelot and the village nearby, where the villagers were hiding in, hoping to survive and hoping to not being found by the Romans. Sal felt his father, Myrddin, doing the same, aiding him in his quest to vanish the village that once would be called Hogsmeade in the castle from view. It was a sword from behind that finally penetrated the armor Sal was wearing. He had been fighting for hours and hours. His magic had been weak because he still was protecting Camelot and the women, children, and old people with it. He was fighting a Roman priest at that time, a Roman druid. The Roman was a battle mage, and he definitely was the better fighter, especially because Sal could and would not let go of the protection that shielded Camelot from the sight of the invaders. Sal had a hard time battling the priest, but he still was fighting well. He was a knife fighter, and the battle mage had problems to react in time for Sal's fast fingers. And maybe Sal would have succeeded in this fight, even if he was unable to do a lot of magic at that time, wouldn't have entered another sword the battle. The sword that finally penetrated his armor and showed its cool steely blade to his eyes, sticking out of his chest, was from another priest who had entered the fight while Sal had dodged the curses of the other frantically. Sal just stared at the steel that adorned his chest, steel that was red with blood, his blood. Then the steel vanished and Sal fell. He could not breathe. He could not hear his heart beat anymore. My heart, he thought, while the world darkened. He pierced my heart. Pathetic, a voice said in Latin with distaste, standing over him. Don't, another one said in the same language. He has done nothing that would give you the right to disrespect him in death. He was pathetic. I could kill him with a single stroke with my sword. A hand softly caressed Sal's traditionally braided hair. He was a strong one. His magic is still filling the air. Whatever he was hiding from us, he succeeded in his quest. We will not find it even if we would return years after his death. But a sacrifice, the other one said softly. He sacrificed himself for hiding whatever he wanted us not to find. He would have killed me and you if he wouldn't have tried to hide whatever it was. Something was pressed in Sal's unmoving hands. For a safe journey, my foe, the soft voice said. You have earned yourself this last right. May your soul not be lost on its way home. The darkness finally took him and his last ragged breath stilled. Then the conscious that was called Sal was no more. Now back to present timeline. The article that was printed by the Daily Prophet the following day was astonishing. Harry was sitting on his bed reading his newspaper calmly. The trail of the boy who lived was held in front of the Wizengamot because of the gravity of his offense. Harry read to himself, "The boy is guilty, there was no arguing about that fact. Everybody knew, the trail itself was just a formality," said Minister Cornelius Fudge. At the end it was a formal error that got the boy who lived off the hook. When Harry finished the front page headliner article, he snorted. "So you're trying to legalize your actions on that way, Minister," he finally said to himself. "Way to go. You really should not start the next round of our game without even looking at your opponent." "Talking to yourself again, Harry," another voice interrupted. Harry blinked and looked up. "Shouldn't you stay hidden, Reg? It's the middle of the day." Hardly, Reg snorted while looking pointedly at a snoring Ron in the bed next to Harry. "It's 6:30 in the morning. Only you would be awake this early." Harry shrugged. "The sun's out," he countered. "There is no way I could sleep at a time like that." Reg snorted. "Yeah, but you're not normal," he said while shaking his head in disbelief. "If I would not know you for at least 10 years now, I would think you are absolutely crazy just for opening an eye at that early hour. So you don't think I'm crazy because you know me?" "No, I know you're crazy. I do not have to think it anymore." "Very funny, haha." Reg did not counter that one. Instead, he sat down next to Harry and looked at the newspaper in Harry's hands. "What will you do against?" "Nothing much for now," Harry answered. "I am not ready to show my cards openly. There's still way too much to do until I am." "You should have started earlier." "I could not," Harry answered sincerely. But 10 years ago was not a real Horcrux, Harry answered softly. Redrig's eyes widened. All the years he had thought, what was it? When Riddle came to the Potters that night, Harry started softly. He was still missing a Horcrux to his perfection. He wanted to have 7 pieces. At that time he had 6. The last one, that one that now is embedded in his snake, he wanted to make it with Harry Potter's death, to emphasize his power. Riddle is arrogant. The death of Harry Potter should have been his absolute triumph, above death. The day of his absolute victory. I still don't understand. A Horcrux is fool magic. You cannot make a Horcrux by simply killing someone. You make it by doing a lot of rituals beforehand, and then channeling your longing for eternity in the time of your victim's death, Harry answered, sighing. That sounds as if you know how to create one, Regulus said, frowning. Harry just shrugged. I know how to do it, he answered, unconcerned. I learned it a long time ago. But you know that you have to have knowledge about something to be able to create a ritual to destroy something, Harry remarked and rolled his eyes. Anyway, the artifact we destroyed 10 years ago was the artifact Riddle wanted to use at that time to create his Horcrux. But why? Because the magic of a Horcrux begins way before the ultimate killing. He still could have used this artifact to create a new Horcrux. It was prepared. I doubt he would have used it, but I also was not willing to take the risk, Harry answered sincerely. So we destroyed it. Yes? Well, I understand your reason, Reg finally said, sighing. But I still do not understand why we waited. Because we had to be sure, Harry interrupted. Had to? Had to be sure about what? Harry snorted. You sound like a parrot today, Reg, he said, amused. I waited so long to be sure Riddle's last ties with his Horcruxes really were cut. Except of the dairy, there is no way telling when Riddle created his Horcruxes. It takes some time until the split soul parts are not able to feel each other. The safest bet was to wait until Riddle lost and regained his body, which he finally did at the beginning of the summer. Wouldn't it have been safer to destroy them while Riddle had no body? No, Harry answered. A wraith has a better connection to other spirits. The Horcrux has to be on its own for a long time until it cannot be felt by a wraith anymore. The only Horcrux that I know is old enough for something like that is the diary. Maybe there is another, but I dared not to risk it until Riddle regained his body and with it lost the connection with his other soul parts he had as a wraith. Well, thanks for the lecture. I am certain I know enough about it now, Reg said, snorting. I even know more than I ever wanted. Don't sulk. Knowledge is power, and you know it. How Slytherin of you, Harry. You know you are supposed to be a Gryffindor, Ridge retorted. Harry just shrugged. Ron's still sleeping and the others are downstairs. There is no one in the room who would feel horror-stricken about it. Harry said while shrugging again, so why bother to hide my true self from you? You know I am no Gryffindor material. I know I am no Gryffindor material. Even if I stay silent, this truth will not change. Definitely not. And now be a good boy and go back hiding. You do not want to be found by your brother, do you? It would be hard to explain how you are still alive after all. Believe me, there are a lot of things harder to explain than that. Regulus said, shrugging, but he complied and left the room. Harry smiled, but said nothing. He knew that Regulus was right, but he also knew that telling Sirius that Regulus was still alive and well would be a hard task if they ever had to do it. Well, there are other things to worry about, Harry finally said to himself. What to do next? What to do next? When Xenophilius Lovegood sat down at 10 in the morning at his breakfast table, he still was thinking what to put first in his next edition of the Quibbler. He was still contemplating between the article about nibblers and their breeding and the article about cackling cracklers. Both, of course, were important articles, and they both deserved to be treated that way. But what to choose? What to choose? He wasn't anywhere near the answer to this important question when the owl post arrived. Well, at least he wasn't near it until he saw an innocent-looking envelope between his normal mail. Zeno raised an eyebrow. The last muggle-looking envelope he had received had been a few weeks ago by proxy. Rebecca Amarin of the Daily Prophet had somehow lost it in Zeno's study at that time. Well, Let's look at this. Zeno decided and opened the envelope to pull out a letter. He read it and his eyebrows shot in the air. It seemed as if he had to change some of his plans for the next edition of the Quibbler. So instead of pondering which article to use for his next edition, Zeno Lovegood hurriedly stood up in search of quill and parchment. He spilled his coffee when he sat it down on the table, but did not even look or mourn the loss of his favorite beverage. He had other things to do after all. 10 minutes later he finally had found an intact quill and enough parchment to take some notes for a first try in answering the letter. He returned to the table and vanished the mess he had created when setting down his coffee mug, not even noticing when he not only vanished the coffee but also the mug as well. So, what to write? He pondered instead, excitement in his eyes. What to write? His eyes returned to the letter, reading it again, this time slowly and carefully while his right had travelled over the parchment, printing down answers and questions of his own. Dear Editor, the letter read, "Thank you for answering my questions as good as you have been able to. I do understand the mechanism of the press a little better now, but there are still other things I do not get. The day before yesterday, the Daily Prophet has been printing an article about Harry Potter's trial and stated in it that there has been a formality which prevented that Mr. Potter has been judged. Well, when I read this, I got hooked and decided to research myself. So I asked at the ministry for a copy of the court script. Did you know those are public after a trial? And read it. The content of the script made me wonder again if the Daily Prophet is simply a propaganda campaign for the ministry. How come they can call it a formality that prevented Mr. Potter be tried, when in truth the minister seems to try all to prevent to even have a fair trial at the beginning? If it would have been me, my parents would have sued him for withholding evidence. The trial script clearly states that the minister did not do the minimum to hold up our own laws. Did you know that there is a law that the crime scene has to be visited by auras and evidence against the accused has to be found? Without evidence, the accused cannot be judged. That the minister let something crucial as that slide lets me think about all the other prisoners in Azkaban. What is with them? Had they had a fair trial? Have they been able to contact a lawyer? Have they had evidence against them to prove their guilt? Or have they been judged like Potter nearly would have been judged, without evidence, just by hearsay? A trial like Mr. Potter's even raises the question about Mr. Sirius Black's guilt. How do you know if Mr. Black really was guilty when the trial was faulty like Mr. Potter's? I would seriously check this trial also, like all the others since Grindelwald. I don't know how you feel, but I would sleep better knowing that the persons in Azkaban really belong there and knowing that I will not be sentenced to Azkaban without a proper trial. Think about that yourself. Do you want to have a trial knowing that you cannot defend yourself because someone is withholding information necessary to prove you're innocent? Do you want to be in Azkaban for decades, knowing you're innocent but unable to prove it because someone did not even permit you to take Veritaserum or show your memory? Is this the justice of the wizarding world you are hoping for? After all, we cannot all be a Harry Potter who seems to have eaten the law books for breakfast. I did include a copy of Harry Potter's trial script to show my point. Oliver Twist. After that, the court script had been added to verify Oliver Twist's words. Xenophilus Lovegood grinned. As important as nibblers and their breeding and cackling cracklers were, sometimes important articles had to take the second place for something less important, but more informing. Now he just had to ponder which of the other two articles he also would add as the next important ones. But this answer could wait. Anyhow, there was an answer to write. There was no way that Zeno Lovegood would let a student's questions unanswered. After all, Diagon Alley normally was an idyllic place. The people who lived there knew their neighbors often better than they knew themselves, and secrets really did not stay secret very long. As it was an absolutely surprise for the inhabitants of Diagon Alley that they suddenly seemed to not understand one of their own anymore. Ollivander had finally gone insane. First, it had not been spotted. He just had changed his usual habit a bit. Instead of staying in his shop all day, Ollivander had gone outside and had sat down in front of his entrance, in his hands, a huge book. "Not this one. This isn't it also," he was heard muttering while leafing through the book. It has to be an ancient one. 2 days later he had exchanged the book for very, very old scrolls. 3 days later he finally sat down one of the scrolls, a huge smile on his lips. "There it is," he said, and then picked up the scroll to read further, just to pale more and more the more he read what was written on the scroll. That was the final time the people in Diagon Alley had seen him sane. After that, well, Ollivander definitely had lost his mind that particular week, and he had not found it again, even all those weeks later. A few weeks previous, after the visit of one particular wizard, it had suddenly happened. Garrick Ollivander had snapped. Like an old, dry branch, he had snapped into two when the pressure was suddenly too much for him to handle, or so the inhabitants of Diagon Alley said. One day Garrick Ollivander had minded his shop like usual, and the next he suddenly had started to clean would be the right word. There was just one problem involved. Never had people ever seen Ollivander clean his shop as thoroughly as he did after that day. "What are you doing, Garrick?" Florian Fortunescu finally asked after watching the wizard working for the last few weeks. "Preparing," Ollivander answered without looking up, while carrying out boxes of stuff and vanishing them on the streets or tucking them away in other expanded boxes. "I see that. But why?" "I have to empty my basement," Ollivander answered without looking up, "and I just have half a year at most to do it. I have to be prepared until Christmas." "Prepared? Prepared for what?" "For what might happen," Ollivander said. "I am no fool. I have seen this staff once at the time of Grindelwald. Father also has seen the staff when it was time to bring down Lord Morgan, even if it was grandfather who made that bargain that day." "Bargain? What are you talking about, Garrick?" Fortunescu asked again, and this time the slightly strange and now utterly insane wandmaker looked up in Fortunescu's eyes. "I have gotten a warning. Uncertain times lay ahead of us. I will have to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. I have seen the staff of destiny," Ollivander answered, and Fortunescu gave up. The man had definitely snapped. Utterly insane. Absolutely crazy. Disturbingly mad. Yes, that was Garrick Ollivander now. But, so guessed Fortunescu. That was okay. Ollivander was after all quite old. If he wanted to get odd quirks, who was Fortunescu to stop him? As long as the man still produced his superb wands, he could be crazy for all Fortunescu cared. "Well, then have fun, preparing," Fortunescu finally said, turning away from the man. "I hope your staff of destiny will come again to tell you the danger has passed some day." Ollivander just sighed. "You don't understand," he said. "I am sure it somehow makes sense to you," Fortunescu offered. Ollivander just sighed again. "Think of me what you want. You will be grateful long before the end," he replied, the ice cream shop owner. "You will see." And with that he turned away for the disturbed man and returned to his work. He had to clean his basement, and he had to activate the old dormant wards on his property. After all, what good would it do to have wards as good as Gringotts and Hogwarts when he did not activate them before the storm? And then there were the other preparations, the food, the linen. Suddenly, Ollivander wished he had never seen Harry Potter again. Amelia Bones was searching through hundreds of files. Her whole office was full with them. Some of them had been read by her and discarded. Others were still waiting to be read. She grumbled. Nothing. 3 days of search in the archives and nothing. Not even a trace of a trail. Again, Amelia growled, and for a moment her eyes turned to the newspaper on her desk. The newspaper had been published 3 days ago. Now it was nearly buried beneath files. Just the second part of the offending article that had started Amelia's fanatic search through the ministry files was still in the open. It read, "Dear Mr. Twist, I must tell you, you have been shocking me. I, like maybe a lot of other witches and wizards, was not aware about the law that states that evidence has to be found first. I had to look up my rights myself before I even could think of answering your questions. It is truly a shame that there is no class in Hogwarts that tells the students their rights in society. I cannot even understand after I researched it why I never tried to be aware of my own rights until now. The only thing I can come up with is that there is no one who knows their rights, and as such no one criticizes one if you yourself don't know. As it is, I do think many other witches and wizards do know nothing about their own rights, like myself just a few days ago, and think because of that everything the ministry states is true. Now I suddenly start to doubt it myself. I, of course, have never been in front of the Wizengamot to be tried. What if it is normal procedure to not even try to secure if you are guilty? So I, like every intelligent citizen would do, decided to look up other trials just to secure for myself that the Wizengamot normally is a fair institution. Of course, the first name that came to my mind to look up was, like you have also mentioned, the mass murderer Sirius Black. He is, after all, the most known criminal in this day and age, after his escape from Azkaban 2 years ago. So I went to the ministry to look up his court script as well. I was truly agitated when I finally was able to receive an answer to my question about the court script of Sirius Black. While getting the court script of Mr. Potter just took me a few minutes, getting Black's took hours, and at the end I still left with empty hands and just a sentence wiser. There is no court script of Sirius Black's trial, I have been told. As there was no trial to begin with. Horrifying news. I know, I was shocked as well. So I looked up other trials. My results are frightening, and it pains me to say this. You are quite right, Mr. Twist. To worry, the most of the trial I looked into were held with just one witness to attest for their crimes. No veritaserum, no shared memories, just the plain word of one witness to sentence a person to a life of horror in Azkaban. And to send a person to Azkaban, even someone whose crime is as famous as Mr. Black's, without a trial, is truly appalling. I do not dare to think how many others whose trial I did not look into were tried with no evidence except of hearsay or put in prison without a trial. The most horrible part in it, my dear Mr. Twist, is that as it stands, it could happen to anyone. Every witch or wizard who is just near a crime scene could be accused and tried without being able to prevent it. And they are not like Mr. Potter, who is a famous light figure in our world, and who seems to know the law book like his own robe pocket. Sadly, it still stands, that the ministry has the full control about who is tried with how much evidence. So do hope that you will never be part in an investigation. You could wake up in Azkaban just because you bought your milk at the wrong place to the wrong time. Xenophilius Lovegood, editor of The Quibbler. Emilia growled again. This could not be true, could it? She sighed and returned to her search. She simply had to find those damned papers about Sirius Black. Something like the papers about his imprisonment or the interrogation by the Aurors. Until now she had found nothing, nothing at all, and it worried her more than every other thing she had discovered in the years in the ministry. Her eyes turned again to the files in her hands, and with another grumble she returned to her search. Why, oh why had there been so many Blacks? Emilia was sure that at the end of the day she would have learned to hate the name Black. I hope this search is worth it, she sighed. And when there truly was no evidence of anything about Sirius Black that would make his imprisonment legal, Emilia knew she would go to hell and back to ensure that the right thing was done in the end. Even if she had to destroy the ministry stone by stone to reach her goal. Barnabas Cuff sat at his table in the office of the Daily Prophet and was sorting articles when someone knocked on his door. Come in. The door opened, and a woman Barnabas had not seen since she had lost a letter to the Daily Prophet in Ottery St. Catchpole entered. Ah, Becky, he greeted her happily. Rebecca Amarin gritted her teeth. It's Rebecca, boss, she said stiffly. I know, Becky, my dear, Barnabas said, still smiling. So, my girl, what brings you to my humble office in the first place? The woman in the door stared at him as if he had lost his mind in the dumpster next door and then entered fully and closed the door behind her. Have you read the newest article in the Quibbler, boss? She asked. Which one? This interesting one, about the blue-striped unicorns in America or the amazing description of the mating habits of Nargles? Barnabas returned, grinning. Rebecca Amarin snorted. Neither, and you know it, boss. Barnabas sighed at her words and stopped joking. I have, he simply said. And? Nothing, he answered. We gave away the first letter for a reason. But we cannot do nothing. We are a newspaper. If this is true, then it would be the most interesting story since... No. So, you will just sit there, look out your window and pretend the article in the Quibbler does not exist. There is nothing I can do, Becky. This time the woman growled. We are a newspaper. We cannot do nothing. So what do you want me to do? Barnabas hissed. Should I just publish the article without caring what the ministry says? They will punish us severely if I do. We need its aid. It has the most influence on our newspaper and we cannot simply turn away from them. Then try to get others in our boat. Of course. Let me write to the Malfoy and tell them, hey, I don't know if you know, but the English part of your family is using us to imprint their views in the rest of the population. Would you please talk to them and stop them? That's insane. Genius, Rebecca interrupted. Excuse me. That's genius. You told me yourself that the French part of the Malfoy family have a large percentage of holdings. They can change everything. You forget that they're Malfoys. Then we just tell them that Lucius Malfoy declared himself the Lord of Malfoy. They will not be pleased. The Malfoys are after all a part of their family, and should by all means not have a lord on its own. They definitely will not follow a part of their family that has acted without their lord's conscience. Maybe Lucius Malfoy is allowed to act for the lord in Britain, Barnabas said. Maybe, but if he isn't, Becky. Try it, the witch said. If it goes wrong and the ministry is charging you, tell them it was me. I will take the fall if I must. But Barnabas stopped when he saw the glint in her eyes. Very well, I will, he finally said. But don't get your hopes up, my dear. The answer was a smile before the witch left him so that he could write the letter. Barnabas just sighed after the door closed. He had never considered. Well, he finally said, mentally saying goodbye to his job, office and freedom. Even if it bites me in the ass, Becky's right. I have done nothing for too long. And Barnabas would take the fall if it went wrong. There was no way he would destroy Becky's career for something simple like a letter. Albus Dumbledore, meanwhile, sat in his chair in the headmaster's office and stared at the article of Oliver Twist in the Quibbler. He sighed. 16 years of careful laid plans, and now a simple article could destroy them if it found its way in the wrong hands. Fudge would never let something like that be published in the Daily Prophet, Albus reminded himself. There is no way for the article to create huge impact, but just its existence was troubling. Albus Dumbledore sighed again. It was not really the content of the article that troubled him, not that he liked the prospect of a free Sirius Black, but the questions that had been asked. When this Oliver Twist would not stop soon, Albus did not want to think about the consequences of a child criticizing their society. Of course there were many people that would not be pleased, but the words of a child, a teenage boy, would lead to questions by the people themselves. And that someone, even if it was someone like Zeno Lovegood, did not fault the child for its views. Troubling indeed. And then there was Sirius and Harry. The article had not simply printed the letters. No, it had also printed the trial scripted itself, or parts of it anyway. Albus was sure that there would be some interested ones that would hurry to the ministry to get a trial script themselves. Normally this would not have bothered Albus, but the trial had shown a Harry Potter Albus Dumbledore did not like to be known. Until now, Albus Dumbledore and Harry Potter had been seen as two parts of the same side. But now Albus Dumbledore had done nothing to help his pupil to get it had been all Harry Potter himself. It showed independence on Harry's side, and also an unwillingness to let Albus protect him. No, Albus did not like it one bit. And if I am right and it's truly Voldemort who is using Harry now, this impact Albus did not even dare to think about. No, he knew what to do. Somehow he had to stop this Oliver Twist fellow before he could create havoc in the wizarding world. Now to the next problem. How to stop a phantom like Twist. Story in the past, timeline until year 307 AD. The first time Sal awoke, the pain claimed him instantly again, and he lost conscious before becoming aware of anything. The next time he awoke, he had time to recognize that he was hurting badly before he fell in darkness again. The time after that he was able to curse that he was a time traveler and that his father had been right with his theory about Sal being unable to die until he returned to his own time. The third time he lay on the ground for hours until darkness claimed him again. The fourth time he woke, he still was unable to move, but he was able to wish, and wishing he did. The pain he felt while he was lying on the ground was horrible. After some hours lying there, he wished for someone to end his misery. After some days, he prayed for death wholeheartedly. After a week, he would have seen his dead body in the mirror of Erizid when he would have looked in it. His whole body arched and his depleted magic tried to heal him. He did not know how often he nearly visited the realms of the death just to be pulled back to his body and his agony again. When he finally was able to move again, the battlefield was long since deserted. The Romans had simply let the dead lying on the floor and had traveled on. The first thing Sal did when he was able to move again was to look at his hand. The Roman had gifted him a silver coin. It took 1 or 2 seconds until Sal understood that it was meant as a fee for crossing over to death, a gesture for respect. Sal tucked the coin away in his girdle and felt for the rest of his stuff. Mainly his staff, his weapons and potions. No one had robbed him. His things were still all there, but Sal guessed that he had not been robbed out of the same respect that had earned him the coin to cross over. He felt grateful to that one Roman who had respected him enough for stopping his comrades. Not that any one of them could have taken his weapons. His weapons were goblin-made. If he really needed them or if he wished it, they would return to him instantly. It still took Sal some days until he was able to stand up again, so as soon as Sal was able to stand again, he gathered the bodies of the dead and buried them. It was hard. The first dead he recognized was Gawain, his old teacher. The man had been pierced with 12 arrows. One of his feet had been cut off, and his eyes were glassily staring in the sky. The Roman he had fought with had succumbed his own wounds, and lay on Gawain's chest like a lover at night would do. The next he found was Lancelot. The blade of the sword that had killed him was still sticking in his chest, broken like Lancelot himself. Sal had to fight tears while his mind played over and over the times when Lancelot had been with him. It replayed Lancelot's laughter, his jokes, his rashness, his friendly tone. Sal fought the feelings with his occlumency and buried the man at the far end of Hogwarts, no, Camelot's lake, next to Gawain. Then he continued. Sal wasn't sure how many days it took until he found the next he knew. The magic in the air had stopped the dead from rotting, so when he found Arthur and Medred they still looked like they had in life. This time Sal cried while his hands caressed the locks of his brother and father, and the fury sent shivers through his body. He took away the sword he had given to his father and bound it again to his girdle, unable to look at the wound that had killed Medred, a wound that had been made by Sal's sword. The wound Arthur had received was as hard to look at as Medred's. This wound Arthur had received because Sal had trained his brother in fighting, and Sal felt fury, a fury directed at both of them for using Sal's gifts to destroy a person Sal had loved, a fury that was directed at both of them because they had decided not to bother and talk about it. Instead they had fought and killed each other for nothing more than power. Oh, how Sal loathed them for it. Still he buried them next to each other, next to Lancelot and Gawain. Then he broke down and cried again while anger filled his heart. Anger at fate, anger at the Romans, anger at his fathers and brother. Finally, after hours, he stood up and stumbled back to his task. He buried the dead, hundredths of men in hundredths of graves, and then he found the last one. This one person he had known, that he had lost since the day he had become aware again, and at the same time had hoped to find unharmed even now. He was lying there as if he was sleeping. His eyes were closed and his staff in his hands. There was no wound on his body that would have killed him, but magic needed no wound to kill someone. Sal just could stand there and stare at him. Then he finally fell down on his knees next to him and reached for him with trembling hands. The white hair still was as soft as it had been when he was still alive. Sal whispered, and then the loneliness came crashing down on him, the loneliness and the feeling of loss. Sal wept. Of course he had known that Merlin was an old man. Of course he had known that he would lose him. But losing him from old age or losing him in a battle was different, and Sal had never thought that he would not see Merlin again when the battle finally ended. A soft arm sneaked around his waist and cradled him against a warm, nearly hot and comforting body. "Weep, fledgling. You have the right to do so. You have lost far too many to take it calmly," a warm voice said. I have to bury. I will bury him. You have buried far too many, fledgling." Sale just shook his head and tried to free himself from the stranger. "He is my father. I have to bury him," he answered, while he tried to get free. "And he was my egg. I have the right to do so too, my fledgling," the stranger said softly. "I will let you aid me, but I will be the one to bury him. I am his father. I should do it." Sal looked up at this and stared at the stranger. The stranger's face looked a lot like Merlin's, but the eyes were golden, burning with red flames, and definitely not human at all. What are you?" The stranger smiled. "I am a phoenix," he answered softly. "But this form is temporary," the man said. "I will lose it in some hours. The most time it is strenuous to take on a human body, and the one time it wasn't was a lot of years ago. It was the time I raised your father. Don't frighten the egg." "Forax," another voice said, the voice of a woman. Sal turned and stared at the woman behind the man. Her hair was graying and her eyes yellow like the basilisks Sal had killed in second year. Her eyes had the same shape and coloring like Merlin's. "So you felt his death also, Eliakis," the phoenix said softly. "Of course I did. I am his mother after all," the woman said and bowed down to Sal. Sal did not know what happened, but as soon as her hands met him he felt himself shrink until he was a little child. The woman picked him up and then turned to Forax. "Will you take our egg?" she asked softly. The phoenix nodded. This time the funeral was different. While Sal had just buried the death, Merlin's parents decided to burn their son. Sal watched the burning, and after Merlin's body had been burned, his ash was taken to the walls of Camelot. "You have died protecting these walls and all that they stand for. One day you will be needed again to protect them. Rest in peace, my egg. Will you continue to protect what you wanted to protect all along?" Forax said, and the ash was taken by the wind, and suddenly a warm feeling enveloped the air around them, a feeling that Sal knew from his time in the future. It was this feeling that had told him from the first day he had entered the castle that he was home. "What?" he asked, astonished when a soft wind caressed his cheek. "Your father, fledgling," the phoenix answered softly. "Or did you think he would leave you for good? Whenever you return, he will always welcome you home." And with that, the woman carried Sal out of the grounds that later would become Hogwarts. As soon as they left, a heavy and at the same time comforting feeling settled down on Sal's shoulders. The wards, he recognized, but not just the wards, also the essence of his father, a father that he had lost but that had not left him. Sal smiled while again tears started to mare his cheeks. "Don't cry, my egg," the woman said. "Grandma and Grandpa are still here. From now on we will raise you as our own." "I am a grown-up," Sal answered while trying to hide his tears. "No, you aren't," the woman answered. "You are a little adorable egg, and I will raise you as mine." The man snorted. "You do not even know the name of Merlin's egg, Eliakis, and you already started the plan to raise him. Have you even asked him before you shrunk him to an egg again?" "Hush you, dear," Eliakis said, "or you will not be allowed to aid me in raising him." Forax just snorted. "Well, at least I finally know I lost it fully," he said. "I started to doubt my sanity when I decided to hatch my egg with a basilisk. Just an insane phoenix does the same again with his egg's egg." The woman snorted. "You should be grateful for every day we have. One day I will not recognize you anymore, so don't complain," she answered, and cradled Sol as if he really was a little child. "And I am sure the little one will appreciate to have a family again, even if this family will more often be a snake and a bird than human." The man snorted but then sighed. "I am sure he will," he finally said. "Where to next?" "The goblins," Sal said quietly. "They have to take Excalibur. I cannot." Again tears threatened to fall. I cannot use it again. Not now, maybe later, but not now. The woman, Sal's grandma, just caressed his cheek. All right, my egg, she said softly. We will go to the goblins, and after that we will go on. I will not raise my egg's egg in this cold and unfriendly country. It was hard enough to raise my egg here. I will not do so again with my egg's egg. The man just snorted. Then let's leave the country. How about somewhere warm like Egypt or Rome? Egypt, Ep3 decided. I am sure our little egg does not want to come anywhere near Rome for the next years. Egypt, it is, the phoenix said and held out a hand. The woman took it, and in the next moment flames licked on their bodies. A moment later they were standing in the middle of the goblin village. Sal had left some years ago. The goblins stared at them, then Grimgud came running, and Ep3 took the sword from Sal and gave it the stunned goblin. We will take the egg and you will guard its sword, she said to the stunned goblin. What? What happened? Another stunned voice said, Valand. Our egg lost its father, Ep3 said. Forax and I decided to raise it again. It's too little for the sword, so we will leave it in your hands. You can hold on it until a family member needs it, or until the egg comes back to claim it. Gryffindor stared at her. Then he looked at Sal and understanding lit his eyes. We will guard it well, Lady Basilisk, he said warmly, until a member of Morganat's family needs it or Morganat returns to claim it. Ep3 just nodded. So mote it be, she said, and held out her hand to Forax. Egypt, now, dear, she ordered. The phoenix snorted but took her hand. A second burning later and they really were in Egypt, and in the middle of the desert. Definitely better, my dear, the female basilisk decided. And now, my egg, let us return to you. The next 200-something years, Sal spent in the company of a phoenix and a basilisk, and while he lived with them, Medred's own child, who he had left behind with his mother Morgana, grew up and married. It had children and they married again. Hundreds of years later, the name Lefay would be lost, but the line continued until there would be born a young girl to one of the descendants. The girl's name would be Lily Evans. Meanwhile, 1,000 years before Lily's birth, Sal was learning to be the child of a basilisk and a phoenix. Both of them insisted on teaching him while they changed locations every week, because the female basilisk insisted on it. Like that, Sal saw a lot of places he had never dreamed about, and all of them were on the warmer parts of the earth. Sal also started to grow again, but it took him nearly all 200 years to even reach his normal 15 years of age again. When he asked his grandmother about that, she just shrugged. Don't worry, she said. It just takes so long because it wasn't you yourself who shrunk your body, but me. But it really does not matter. You are, after all, somehow still 15, my egg. After this explanation, Sal had just sighed and decided not to ask again. He was not interested in hearing another explanation he did not understand fully. All he knew was that he had for over 200 years no control about how old he looked. When he finally had it again, his grandmother just sighed. So you really are a grown-up again, fledgling, she said, sighing. Well, I will not be able to hold on you forever. Just remember, I am here for you as long as I can. Your grandpa and I will come to your aid. You just have to call us. And with that, she let him go again. And Sal left. It was hard at first to be alone again, but he needed to leave. He could not be followed by his grandparents the rest of his life, so he left and returned to Britain and the goblin village he had left all those years ago. Gryffindor was still alive, but very old. His son Valand was now the chieftain of the goblins. When Sal walked in their village, they recognized him instantly. So you are home again, Morganat, Valand greeted him. I am, Sal answered. And Valand flicked his hand to summon Sal's sword. Take it. You are a clan leader, you have to wear your sword. Sal just hesitated a second. I will give it in your care when I leave again, he finally said. When one of Medrod's children asks for a sword, will you give it to them? I will not take it with me when I leave again. I will, as long as you just lend it to them and don't give it up. A goblin might, after all, give his sword to another one, but he will not gift it to him when the sword was made for him. Sal just smiled. I would never give away a gift I received, he answered sincerely. I merely will not need it when I travel the world, and I do not want it to be unused until I need it again. This I can accept and understand. Valen said and welcomed Sal home, where Sal would stay for the next 60-odd years until he finally decided to travel again. The time jumps to year 846 AD onwards. For the last 500-odd years Sal had been wandering. To begin, he had started with an apprenticeship in Ireland to learn more about rituals, potions and runes. Of course, some of the stuff he had known already, but others he had never heard of. After that he had crossed over to the continent and wandered north. He had joined the Viking and had crossed the Atlantic Ocean to Ireland and Greenland. There he had wandered south and visited the countries which would be later Canada, USA and South America. He had joined the humans living there, had learned their magic, languages and ways of life. Finally he had enough. He had returned to Alaska and from there had found a way to Russia. Visiting the Russian sorcerer, he had entered China again. He had crossed it and visited India, and after that Africa, and finally had returned home. Now he knew a lot of different languages he had not known before, had updated the languages he had known before, and had learned some other writing types. His potion knowledge was tenfold, and his healing arts improved beyond the knowledge of all other living individuals. He also had learned some different battle tactics, and some useful spells for different occasions. On his way home he had visited the Germans, toured Africa again, and lastly lived for a while with some tribes somewhere in the country that would later be Turkey. Then he had returned to Europe, Italy to be exactly. He had planned to visit Rome, just for old time's sake, but when he arrived to chaos and destruction. The Arabs had come to Rome and looted it, and not just the mundane part of Rome, had been the victim of their doings. Sal found the woman in the outer skirts of Rome. To him it looked like she had tried to flee from the Arabs, and had been captured and wounded by them. The man, just a few yards from her, was dead, killed by the Arabian steel that had beheaded him. Sal turned his eyes away and went to the woman instead. He had seen so much dead already that he no longer was bothered by corpses. You learned to ignore the dead when you were fighting for the still living on a battlefield. The first thing that Sal saw were the sharp teeth of the woman, fangs. A vampire, Sal's mind supplied. Until now he had not often met a vampire on his travels. The most of them lived removed from the mundane and magical world in covens, just small enough to remain hidden from both worlds. Sal had never had the desire to search out one of them just to learn more of them. He sighed and cautiously stepped forward until he reached the woman who was curled on the floor facing away from him, hugging something close to her chest. Her back was trenched in blood. A wound, maybe from a sword, had nearly sliced her in half. Sal was surprised that she was still breathing, but then, she was a vampire. Vampires were able to survive things that a human would never survive. When he was just a few steps away, she tensed and turned her face to look at him. Her eyes were a cool silver and staring at him intensely. Her lips moved, showing her fangs, daring him to step closer. Sal stopped. "I do not want to harm you," he said in Latin. The dialect had changed over time, but it was still understood in this part of the world. "Let me take a look at you. I am a healer." The woman just bared her teeth even more. Everyone could say that, she hissed. "Prove it." Sal answered her challenge with steady eyes while he softly tipped with his right hand against his chest, at the place he could feel his still beating heart under his warm skin. A soft glow spread across his chest, showing of the healer's oath he had taken in glowing runes. The woman looked at it and her snarling stopped. "May I help you?" Sal asked again. "Your oath covers all?" she asked, with halting breath. "All creatures, furbolg or not, yes," Sal answered. Her eyes widened when she heard his answer. "You're one of us," she wheezed. "I am a Basilisk-born," Sal answered truthfully, and she relaxed. He took this action and came closer. When she did not bare her teeth again, he sat down beside her. She tensed again when he reached for her. He saw the next moment why. In her arms she was shielding a little child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, a vampire child, her child, he guessed. The little boy looked at him with huge, fearful eyes. "Is he hurt?" Sal asked softly, not reaching out for the child and not addressing it directly. He had grown up in a time when it was considered rude to do either. The woman relaxed again a little bit. She was still wary of him but seemed to decide to trust him for now. "I don't think so," she wheezed, and Sal nodded. "May I take a look?" She tried to open her arms so that he could look at the child, but needed his assistance to do so. Sal frowned. It did not look good for her. If she was unable to even lift her arms, he said nothing. He knew that she would not permit him to heal her until she knew that her son wasn't hurt. Her eyes told him this fact without the need of words. So Sal took the boy from her arms and looked him over. He was fine, just frightened, and was watching him with huge eyes. Sal smiled at him and turned to the boy's mother. When he turned back to her, he again saw the core of the man lying on the ground just a few steps away. He guessed it was the father of the dark-haired vampire child. "He's fine," Sal said softly to the mother. "I need to heal you now. Your child needs you." And the child did, literally. With the father dead and without a coven nearby, there was no way to survive for a vampire child if the mother also died. A vampire lived the first 100 years from the blood that was flowing through the veins of their parents or guardians. It was simply too young to hunt until then. Without the blood, it would die within days. The mother nodded and Sal turned her so that he could see her back. Her spine was broken, some of her inner organs ruptured. Sal grimaced, but still started to weave his magic, trying to mend the damage. He started to draw runes on the ground. Then he searched his girdle for potions and herbs. The most things he had were human-orientated, but some of them could also be used for vampires, others couldn't. So Sal carefully searched his healing supplies for those he could use, and then turned to the woman again. Normally he would have stabilized her with blood magic, but she was a vampire and he knew that she wouldn't react well to his blood. As a Firbolg-born, his blood was toxic to her, as toxic as every Firbolg blood was for a vampire. There was just one exception to the rule: children lived from the blood their parents provided, blood that would be toxic to them if they were adults themselves. Except, of course, they had been fed that blood from early childhood on. It was complicated, but as far as Sal knew, the only Firbolg blood a vampire could consume safely was the blood of those that had raised them. So Sal couldn't take the chance of using his blood to stabilize her. If it entered her body, she would die from it, poisoned. The only thing that Sal could do was using her own blood for the runes he needed to draw, and he did. He took the blood from her wound and drew runes on her neck, her wrists and ankles. He activated the runes and started to apply herbs and potions to her wound. For a moment it looked as if she was getting better. Then his spells broke with a shattering noise and faded out of existence. He cursed under his breath in his father's mother tongue, Parcel tongue, and tried to rescue his stasis runes. He had no chance. The runes broke again before he could even try to activate them. Sal cursed again. He tried for a third time and again the runes dissolved before he could activate them. There was no denying it anymore. Sal closed his eyes, trying not to think of the child next to him who was looking down at its mother, its little hand in its mouth, drooling. "You can't heal," the mother started. Sal sighed. "Yes," he said softly. "I am sorry, but there is nothing I can do to prevent it anymore. My child," the woman said. Then she gathered herself, her effete hand reached out to her son, and Sal pushed the child forward until she could take the boy's hand in her own. The young boy looked down to his mother's face, clearly understanding that something was wrong, but unable to understand what was wrong exactly. "Mama?" the boy asked hesitantly. "Healer," she huffed, and Sal turned his eyes to her face. "What do you need, madam?" he asked softly, while feeling extremely bad just because he was unable to do anything to help her. He knew that today would just add another part to his nightmares. As an answer to his question, she let go of her child's hand and took Sal's instead, and before he could stop her, she bit down on his wrist. Blood oozed from his wound, and Sal flinched, but the woman held tightly, with more strength than he thought she had left, and then bit down her own wrist, mixing her blood with his. "Drink, my child," she hissed. and the boy complied, used to being fed from the wrist of his mother. But it wasn't the wrist of his mother the boy started to feed on. It was Sal's wrist. Sal stared at the child when the boy started to consume first the mixed blood of Sal and the boy's mother, and then just Sal's blood. "What?" "Your child," the woman wheezed. "Anastasius, your child." And then her eyes closed and she moved no more. Sal instead stared down to his wrist and the child sucking on it. "His child? His child?" Great Sal muttered in parcel tongue sarcastically. "I really wanted to have a son, especially a vampire son." The boy, Anastasius, Sal guessed, did not act as if he had understood him. Instead he sucked another few times and then stopped. Sal sighed, healed his wrist, and then buried his head in his hands. "And what should I do with you now?" he asked, rhetorically. The boy looked at him with huge eyes. "Dada?" Anastasius finally said, his voice high-pitched and nervous. "Yes, I guess that's me now," Sal said, sighing. Then he looked at the dead woman. "I also guess we should bury your former parents." So he stood up and turned to the dead man some steps away. He finally decided to drag the man to the woman and burn them both. He burned them and then scooped up the child, secured it in his arms, and turned away from the dead. Rome definitely had lost his charm to him for a while. "Let's go home, Anastasius," he said to the child in his arms. "Home?" the child repeated. "Yes, home. Back to Britannia." "Mama?" the child asked hesitantly. "Mama is dead now, Anastasius. Mama and Dada are in heaven now. They will not come back." "Heaven?" Sal sighed again and pointed at the midday sky. "At night you might see them up there looking down to you, watching out for you," he said to the child. "You just have to search for the brightest stars in the sky." The child didn't answer, but buried its head in Sal's neck. Sal was sure that the boy not really understood. He guessed that the child was maybe 4 or 5 years old, too young to understand the concept of death. Still, it understood that its parents were gone somehow. Sal was sure that the boy would be grieving soon. Sal sighed again, then he strode on. Maybe he should find a home near here for some years until the child was old enough to travel back to Britannia. In the end, Sal settled down in a little village in the Black Forest in the later Germany. The settlement was small and solely magical. First, the other villagers were wary of him. Anastasius was too young to pretend to be human, and the villagers kept their distance at first, nervous about the two vampires. It took nearly 3 years until they understood that Sal truly wasn't a vampire, and that they did not have to worry about the vampire child because it would not hunt at all until it was at least 30 years of age. Until then, Sal would be its only food source. Sal himself also had to get used to give his blood to the child to eat. Blood was a powerful substance, and normally a druid did not part with it easily. To feed it to a child was somehow unsettling at first, especially because Sal had been taught what you could do with blood and what would happen if someone else took your blood for their own purpose. With time, the villagers started to accept Sal and Anastasius. The day Sal found out they had been accepted was the day he found out about the new last name the villagers had given them, Sanguinis. One of them had called Sal Sanguinis. "Wait a minute." Sal had stopped this time, turning to the villager. "Sanguinis?" he asked. "Of blood?" They called him of blood in Latin. The man just shrugged. "Everyone calls you and your son that," the man answered. "It was also the first time someone had called Anastasius son. I called just to let you know about the meeting of the village in 3 nights. Will you be there?" From then on, Sal and Anastasius were sanguinians in the mind of the villagers. They started to interact with them, but Sal knew they would have to leave in a few years. Anastasius needed to see the world before he was old enough to hunt for himself. Sal refused to raise the child with the same fear of humans and other creatures that the other vampires seemed to have. It still took another 10 years living in the settlement until Anastasius was old enough to travel with him. They traveled Europe for a while until Sal decided when Anastasius was 20 years of age. Still looking like a 15-year-old teen because vampires needed nearly 40 years to age to adulthood to finally show his son where Sal came from. And because of that, Sal was back home in Britannia. Back home and back in the conflicts between goblins and wizards, Sal could not understand how these two nations could fight again. When he departed, they had finally had a time of peace. Now, just 500 years later, they were fighting again. Sal had seen it. He had crossed a battlefield where the wounded were still mourning, so Sal had done what he did every time he crossed a place like that. He had stopped and started to help. He healed goblin and wizards alike, uninterested about the cause of their fight this time. He had taught his son some things about healing, knowing that his son was not truly interested in that profession, but also knowing that to know how to heal was important. After he had healed the warriors on both sides, he had walked away. He had been uninterested in getting in the conflict, especially with Anastasius in tow, but now it seemed as if he had no choice. Sal and Anastasius had walked in a fight between goblin and wizards in the middle of the woods. The goblins were less. They had just 3 fighters, trying to shelter 4 women and 7 children. The wizards, the ambushers, were 20 and seemed determined to kill the goblins. Sal sighed. "Wait here, Anna," he said to his son. "I will sort this out." No, but Anastasius. Sal interrupted quietly. "As long as you are fed by me, you do what I tell you. Understood?" The boy looked at him sullenly and in full teenage disobedience, but finally nodded. Sal just rubbed his forehead, trying to clear it from the beginning of a headache. Then he stowed his stuff away under a bush, hid Anastasius behind it, and entered the clearing where the fight took place. His left hand reached for one of his goblin-made daggers. The other one tightened its grip on his staff. "Don't you think that fighting like that is a little bit unfair?" he asked coldly and stared at the wizards. "Don't concern yourself, foreigner," one of the sorcerers said, speaking with a heavy accent that made his words nearly not understandable. Sal estimated that not the sorcerer was speaking with an accent. The language seemed to have changed again. Sal sighed again. Another language he had to update. Well, now he had not the time to do that, so his language skills had to do. "I will have to concern myself when you are treating fellow intelligent beings like that," he answered, trying to imitate the speech of the sorcerers. "You seemed to have missed the message," another one said. "The gathering of lords decided that they are not like us. We are superior to them. We have the right to treat them like we want." "Well, if it is like that," Sal said, concealing his anger behind sarcasm, "then I will do also, treat inferior beings like I want." He did not concern himself with a lot of spell work. Instead, he simply scribbled 4 symbols, 2 of them Norse runes, one an Egyptian hieroglyph, and the other one a Maya symbol, in the earth in front of him, and sent them out to the troublemakers. The sorcerers didn't know what hit them. One moment they were still taunting the goblins, the next they were flying through the air and bound by the trees of the forest. Sal looked them over, his eyes deadly cold. "I think I like treating inferior beings like you like I want," he stated coolly. The sorcerers stared with disbelief in their eyes at him. What are you doing?" one of them spluttered. "We aren't the inferior beings. They are." With that he tried to point at the goblins, but was prevented by the tree which was concealing him. "Oh, you aren't?" Sal asked sweetly. "I thought you are inferior to me. You are no lords, and as such you should be inferior to me. Not that a lord would not be inferior to him, as he was, after all, Arthur Pendragon's son. But that wasn't the point Sal tried to make, so he just stared at the sorcerers, and the sorcerers shuddered under his deadly green gaze. "Of course, being who I am, even a mere lord is beneath me," Sal finally decided to add, just because he could. "So, please tell your lords kindly that the old line will decline to work with them. Emrys sends his regards." And with that he turned to the goblins. "Clan brothers, is anyone hurt?" he asked in gobbledygook. The goblin changed a look, then one of them made some steps in his direction, still holding his weapon at Sal. "What does this concern you, foreigner?" he also asked in an accentuated gobbledygook. Sal sighed and added another language to update to his list. "I am a healer, so it does concern me," he answered, using the tradition of the goblin to answer for his actions. "But you are also a sorcerer," the goblin answered. "Their healers don't have the same code like the goblin ones." Sal knew the goblin was normally right, but Sal had never been normal. "I am no mere sorcerer, I am a goblin friend, a clan brother," he answered. "I fought with the goblins 500 years ago. I nearly laid my life down to rescue your chieftain. I am not honorless like the ones you call sorcerers." "So you do call them different?" the goblin asked, still holding his weapon in a death grip. "I am not born a sorcerer," Sal answered truthfully. "My father was a druid, a Basilisk-born. My mother was one of the old. I cannot call myself a sorcerer with a heritage like that. I call myself a Basilisk-born." Sal hoped his answer was enough. He wasn't sure if the magical creatures still called themselves Firbolg, but it was the term he had learned, and he wouldn't change calling himself it as long as he could still use it. "Do you have a name, foreigner?" the goblin asked, and Sal sighed, relieved silently. Being asked for his name meant that the goblin did consider his statement as something that could be true. "I am Salvazar Emrys," he answered, then turned and winked at his son. "This is my adopted child, Anastasius Sanguinius. I also have a goblin name. Your chieftain named me Morganath." Now the goblins that had before looked at his son, all openly stared at him, hope and unbelieving in their eyes. "What was the name of the chieftain who named you, and what did his son gift you when you left?" The speaker of the goblins asked, tension in his voice mingling with hope. "His name was Gringud," Sal answered. "His son Valand gifted me a vault in your bank and these." With that he drew one of his daggers and showing it, the peak still pointing to the earth. The goblin speaker extended a hand and Sal gave him his dagger. Expert eyes looked over the slim short blade which was hiding in self-produced shadows. The hand of the goblin caressed the blade and the name on it. Then he returned the blade. "I thank you, Morganath," he finally said. "I am Ragnoth Valendoth Grangod. It was my grandfather who gifted you this blades. I am now the chieftain of the clans. These are my family, my brothers, my sister, and my brother's wives and children. I welcome you back to the clans, and as a clan brother, I ask you to help us." "I thank you, Ragnuk," Sal answered, and bowed slightly. Then he scrutinized the other goblins. "So, is anyone hurt?" Sal asked again. "My son," the speaker answered, "but I fear you won't be able to help him. His wounds are too deep." "Let me decide," Sal answered. The other goblins exchanged a look, then they opened his way to a child that had been protected by all the others. It was lying on the ground, blood oozing from a deep wound in the stomach. Sal could clearly see that the organs inside were also stabbed. This was nothing a mere wizard healer could heal. Even one of the goblin ones would surrender at these wounds. But Sal wasn't one or the other. He had hundreds of years of experience. He was not sure he could heal the boy, but he was sure that when anyone could, he was. "It will be hard, but I may be able to heal him," he finally said while summoning his rucksack without even looking up from the deadly wounded boy. "I cannot promise anything, but let me try." Now he could clearly see hope in the eyes of the goblin. He looked at his own son, who stood a little awkward in the clearing, and motioned for him to get Sal's things. The boy did as he was told, and Sal returned his gaze to the goblin. "It is a deep wound," Morganath Ragnok said in that moment skeptically. "My wife is a healer, even she is unable." "I just asked for a try, nothing more," Sal answered. Ragnok stared at his dying son, then at Sal. "So be it, Morganath. It just can help." Sal nodded, took his stuff from the hands of his son, and searched it for herbs he needed. Then he turned to the middle of the clearing, drawing hastily runes, hieroglyphs and symbols on the ground, followed by circles, pentagrams and lines. A wave of his staff turned the earth to a ritualistic stone bed. After that he turned around and fetched the boy up from the ground, carried him to the bed and laid him down. When his family crept near, he stopped them before they could enter the outer circle. "Don't enter the shield runes," he said. "I cannot have anyone contaminate them." The family reacted in jumping 2 steps back, staring at the circles and runes. "What is this?" Ragnuk asked. "Ritualistic healing," Sal answered. "I am not sure if anyone still does that, but it will serve my purpose well." "A dark ritual?" Ragnuk asked, hesitating. Not dark, Sal answered. I will not kill anything to do it. Ritualistic magic was never just solely dark. There is always a light and a dark side of things. And with that he activated the runes. The time in the inner circles stopped, and with it the bleeding of the boy. The outer one disinfected the area, and others balanced the magical flow, so that magic would not disrupt the ritual he would do. Then Sal turned to his herbs and potions, and took out an herb and one of his potions. This is a sleeping potion, he said to the boy. And this one is an herb to conceal the pain. Holding up the herb, chew the herb and drink the potion. After that you will not feel anything anymore and you will simply go to sleep. He knew that the combination he was giving the boy was dangerous, but his stock was limited and that was the best he could come up with. The boy did as he was told, and not a minute later his eyelids fluttered and closed. Sal waited the next 5 minutes to be sure the boy really slept and did not feel anything. Then he took out one of his daggers and cut his own wrist. Blood flowed and dropped on the drawn circle. The circles one after another lit up. Then Sal wrote carefully some runes with his own blood on the forehead of the boy. The same thing he did with the boy's wrists and ankles. Then he wrote the same runes on his own forehead, wrists and ankles. After that he closed his own wound and chanted. The runes lit. One moment the clearing was as bright as in daylight, then the light succumbed to a shimmering red. The boy would be bound to Sal's strength for now. It would be tiresome for him, but it would bind the soul of the boy to his body, and that was the only thing that mattered. Sal took a deep breath, waited another 2 minutes, and began after that with cleaning the wounds. They were gruesome, and far more deadly as they looked. Sal had to call all his knowledge of healing in his mind to start mending the organs. Taking care of the magic flow of the young goblin, he mended one organ after the other, sometimes pausing to make sure the magic of the young goblin still wasn't hindered in its natural flow through the body. Sometimes he also paused to remember how the organs were connected or how they looked. Runes, hieroglyphs, symbols mixed with spells in different languages, herbs and potions slowly mended the organs. Finally, the last of the organs looked again like it should. Sal took another deep breath. Then he transfigured a needle, sterilized it in a cold flame, and started the tiring process to sew the outer wounds. He knew that there were spells to mend wounds like that, but he dared not to use them. They would disturb the spell work he used to mend the inner organs, and that he could not risk. The boy would have to live with some heavy scars, but it was better than dying. And maybe Sal could later, when the organs were all right, mend the wounds magically. Now they had to heal naturally. He disinfected the suture and bandaged the wounds. Then he carefully destroyed the ritual circle and the runes on the forehead, wrists and ankles of the boy. After that he also destroyed the runes on himself. The blood he had used to draw lit again for another moment, and then it vanished into little red sparkles which flew away with the wind. "You can come now," he said to the goblin family. As soon as he said that, they came running. The mother reaching out for her son but stopping before touching him. "How is he?" she asked, fear in her voice. Sal opened his mouth to reply but then grinned. "How about asking him yourself?" he asked, and smiled at the young boy who had just opened his eyes. "How do you feel, my boy?" "Strange," the boy answered. "I don't hurt, but there is something tight around my waist." "That might be the bandage." Sal answered, chuckling. "I could not mend your outer wounds because I feared to disturb my work with your inner wounds. It will have to heal naturally. I am sorry." "But he will live?" Ragnuk asked hopefully. "Well, he is awake and seemed to be fine, so when nothing goes terribly wrong, yes, he will," Sal answered. "But tell me, how come your child was hurt like that?" "We are living near here," Ragnuk answered. "My boy was playing here. I don't know what happened, but I know he did not return when he should, so I and my family started looking for him. He was hurt like that when we found him. My wife tried to heal him when suddenly these scums turned up and rounded on us. And then you came, that's all I know." "They came and hurt me when I was playing," the boy said. "They let me live. I think they planned to wait for my family to find me to take us all down." The boy's words were grim and far older than the years he counted. For Sal, the young goblin was another boy who had to mature beyond his years. He sighed. He hated it. Children should stay children. They should be able to play, to laugh, and to live. They should not be slain while playing or fearing for their life. He withdrew his thoughts from their path to fix them again to the present. Well, they won't do it again, I am sure, he said coolly, looking at the captured sorcerers who were looking at him with fear in their eyes. When they finally are released from here, they will never think about hurting someone again. Why? Ragnar asked, now also looking at the sorcerers. What did you do? I thought you just captured them. I did, Sal answered. And they will relive all the crimes they did in their own mind and on their own bodies with them as the victims before the trees will let them go. Their punishment will start with sunrise. Ragnar shuddered. Remind me never to anger you, he said. I might be a goblin, but even I prefer a blade through my stomach to this. Oh, it won't kill them, Sal assured Ragnar, shrugging. The deathly blow won't be deathly for them. They just will feel like they are dying. I am sure that after they relived their deeds, they will still be able to walk away, reliving the same thing night after night in their dreams until they regret. Just ask for my sword when I have wronged you. I will give it to you freely so that you can stab me, all right, Morganate? Ragnar commented. It will definitely preferable to this punishment. Sal just shrugged. When you think so, chieftain, he answered unconcerned, and then turned the goblin boy. You should stay in bed for the next days. You may sit up when your mother helps you, but we have to wait until the spell work settles and your wounds have healed a bit. What is with his magic? The mother asked. As soon as he is healed, he should have no problems with it. But I would recommend that he does not do magic for the next fortnight. My magic could interact when he would try, and that is nothing we want to have. So, what will you do now, Morganate? Ragnar asked. Sal shrugged again. I just returned to Britain, he answered. I thought of staying and relearning the languages. They seem to have slightly changed since I was here the last time. It will take some time to update my vocabulary. Maybe I will work as a healer. How about coming with us for the night? Ragnar asked. You can decide tomorrow what you want to do. For one moment Sal thought about declining the offer, but he knew that it would be insulting if he did, and so he gave in. And so he was sucked again into the war between goblins and sorcerers, searching battlefields for wounded people, defending women and children, working together with goblin healers and the clans. His son was following everywhere like a shadow, while learning to fight from the goblins. His son also found his profession as a scholar by the goblins and started working in their archives. Sal let him be. Sal's own father had never pushed Sal into a profession, and Sal would never do it to his son. If Anastasius wanted to be a scholar and live his life for dusty scrolls, then so be it. Sal would not stop him. And like that they slowly drifted apart again, especially after Anastasius finally learned and was able to hunt alone when he turned 32. After that, Anastasius still sometimes returned to Sal to be fed, but the occasions were less and far between, especially with Sal on the battlefield and Anastasius in the archives, both working while they were sometimes miles and miles apart. So Sal healed, searched the battlefields, and aided the goblins. His final aid would be finally being the neutral party in the peace negotiations. But that would be nearly 40 years later.